Get off my property! The combat veteran's voice thundered across his driveway as black SUVs surrounded his modest home. Luke Callahan stood alone against 6 armed security guards protecting the billionaire's daughter who'd sought refuge behind his door. They'd come with money, threats, and the full weight of Richard Carter's empire. But they'd forgotten one thing. Some men can't be bought, especially when they've already lost everything worth losing. Welcome to a story where courage meets power, where a single father's stand ignites a town's rebellion. Comment below where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The October wind cut through Luke Callahan's worn flannel jacket as he pulled his battered F-150 into the Sunoco station off Route 81. 3 in the morning wasn't his usual refueling time, but the overtime shift at what remained of Millfield Steel had pushed him past exhaustion. His hands, scarred from both combat tours in Afghanistan and years of factory work, fumbled with his wallet as he approached the pump. That's when he heard it. A muffled cry that sent ice through his veins. Luke's head snapped toward the sound. Behind the station, near the dumpsters where shadows swallowed the security lights, 3 men were dragging a woman toward a black van. Her designer heels scraped against the asphalt as she fought, her expensive dress torn at the shoulder. "Please, just let me go," her voice carried on the wind. "I won't say anything." A hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her words. Luke's body moved before his mind could protest. 8 years out of Special Forces, but muscle memory didn't forget. He'd promised himself, promised Maddie, no more violence, no more playing hero. But watching 3 men force a terrified woman into a van wasn't something a man walked away from. Not if he wanted to look his 13-year-old daughter in the eye tomorrow. "Hey!" His voice boomed across the lot, the command tone that once ordered soldiers through firefights. "Let her go, now!" The men froze. The largest one, built like a linebacker with a shaved head that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, turned slowly. His hand moved to his hip, not quite drawing the pistol Luke could see outlined beneath his jacket, but making the threat clear. "Walk away, buddy," linebacker said, his voice carrying a practiced menace. "This doesn't concern you." Luke kept walking forward, his stride steady, hands visible but ready. "Funny thing about that. See, I stopped for gas, maybe a coffee, simple night, but now you're making it complicated." He nodded toward the woman, whose eyes were wide with terror above the hand covering her mouth. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let her go, get in your van, and drive away. Or we can do this the hard way." The second man, wiry with nervous energy, laughed. "You serious right now? You know who you're messing with?" "Don't know, don't care," Luke replied, now 15 feet away. "Close enough to act, far enough to react. All I see is 3 cowards and 1 woman who clearly doesn't want to be here." Linebacker's hand moved another inch toward his weapon. "Last chance, hero. Turn around, forget you saw anything, and you get to go home to whatever sad little life you've got." Luke smiled, not with humor, but with the cold certainty of a man who'd faced worse odds in mountain passes where the enemy had every advantage. "See, that's your first mistake. Assuming I've got something left to lose makes you think I'll back down. Your second mistake?" His weight shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of his feet, bringing only 3 guys. The woman's eyes met his, brilliant green even in the harsh lighting, desperate but not broken. She gave the slightest nod, then drove her elbow hard into the ribs of the man holding her. Everything exploded into motion. Luke crossed the distance in 2 strides, his fist connecting with Linebacker's jaw before the man could clear his weapon. The crack echoed off the station walls. Linebacker staggered, and Luke followed with a knee to his solar plexus that dropped him gasping to the asphalt. The wiry one came at him with a knife, a tactical blade that meant training. Luke caught his wrist, twisted until bones ground together, and the knife clattered away. A headbutt to the nose sent him reeling backward, blood streaming down his face. The third man had problems of his own. The woman, whoever she was, fought like someone who'd taken self-defense seriously. She'd gotten free and grabbed a tire iron from near the dumpster, swinging it with desperate precision at his knees. "Van!" Linebacker wheezed from the ground, scrambling for his fallen pistol. "Get to the van!" Luke's boot connected with the gun, sending it spinning under a parked car. He grabbed Linebacker by his expensive suit jacket, hauled him up, and drove him face first into the van's side mirror. The glass shattered, and linebacker crumpled. The wiry one was already running, abandoning his partners. The third man, limping badly from the woman's tire iron assault, helped linebacker to his feet. They stumbled to their van, throwing themselves inside. "This isn't over," linebacker shouted through the window, blood streaming from his nose and a dozen cuts. "You have no idea what you've just done." The van's tires screamed as they peeled out, leaving black marks on the asphalt and the acrid smell of burned rubber. Luke stood in the sudden silence, his breath misting in the cold air, adrenaline still singing through his veins. The woman leaned against the dumpster, the tire iron trembling in her grip. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his distance. She looked ready to swing at anything that moved too fast. She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. I don't know. Am I? Is this okay? Any of this?" The tire iron clattered to the ground as her hand started shaking. "Oh God, what just happened?" "You're in shock," Luke said, his voice gentling. "It's normal. You're safe now. They're gone." "Gone," she repeated, wrapping her arms around herself. Her dress, which Luke now noticed had probably cost more than his truck, was ruined. One heel was broken. Blood trickled from a scrape on her cheek. "No, they're not gone. They'll be back. They always come back." "Who were they?" Luke pulled out his phone. "I'm calling 911. You need to file a report." "No." She lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. "Please, no police. You don't understand. That'll make everything worse." Luke studied her face. Beneath the smeared makeup and disheveled hair, she was beautiful in that way that suggested money, perfect teeth, flawless skin despite the current circumstances, the kind of posture that came from years of deportment lessons. But her eyes held genuine terror. "Those men just tried to kidnap you," he said slowly. "That's a federal crime. You need—" "What I need is to disappear," she interrupted. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll figure something out. But tonight—" She looked around the empty gas station lot like it might suddenly fill with more vans. "Do you know anywhere? A motel that takes cash? Somewhere off the main roads?" Luke thought about the $43 in his wallet, the overtime check that wouldn't clear until Monday, Maddie asleep at home, trusting him to make good choices, safe choices. "The nearest motel is 12 miles down the highway," he said. "But those guys knew where to find you here. What makes you think they won't be watching the motels?" Her shoulders sagged. "You're right. Of course you're right." She laughed again, that broken sound. "I'm so stupid. I thought I could just run, get in my car and drive away and be normal for once." "Where's your car?" She gestured vaguely toward the road. "About 5 miles back. They ran me off the road. Pit maneuver, very professional. When I tried to run on foot, they caught up here." She looked at him with those green eyes. "You saved my life. I don't even know your name." "Luke. Luke Callahan." "Luke." She tested the name, then held out her hand. Her grip was firm despite the trembling. "Isabella, and I'm so sorry for dragging you into this." "Into what exactly?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. "The less you know, the safer you are. Could you just point me toward town? I'll walk. In those shoes, with those men probably circling back?" Luke ran a hand through his hair, already knowing he was about to make a decision he'd regret. "Look, I've got a couch. It's not much, but it's safe. My daughter's home, so you don't have to worry about anything. One night, then tomorrow, you can figure out your next move." Isabella stared at him. "You'd do that? After what just happened, you'd take a complete stranger into your home?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty stupid," Luke admitted. "But I've got a daughter. If she was in trouble, alone, scared, I'd want someone to help her." He shrugged. "Besides, I didn't just fight 3 guys to let you wander off into worse trouble." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod. "Okay. Thank you. Just for tonight." Luke led her to his truck, noting how she checked over her shoulder every few steps. He'd seen that hypervigilance before, in soldiers fresh from combat zones. Whatever Isabella was running from, it had her scared down to her bones. The ride to his house took 20 minutes through dark country roads. Isabella huddled against the passenger door, her reflection in the window ghostly in the dashboard lights. Neither spoke until Luke pulled into his driveway, a modest two-story colonial that had seen better decades, its white paint peeling and front porch sagging slightly. "This is it," he said, suddenly self-conscious about the contrast between his world and whatever world she came from. "It's not much. It's perfect," she interrupted, and sounded like she meant it. "It looks safe." Luke killed the engine. "Few ground rules. My daughter Maddie is 13. She's been through enough. Her mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. I don't want her scared or involved in whatever this is." "Of course, I understand. And tomorrow you need to level with me about who those men were. I put myself on the line tonight. I deserve to know why." Isabella nodded. "Fair enough." They entered through the kitchen. Luke had meant to fix that squeaky hinge months ago. He flicked on the light, illuminating a space that was clean but tired. Mismatched dishes in the drying rack, Maddie's homework spread across the scarred wooden table, a refrigerator covered in school notices, and one photo, the three of them at the beach, back when Karen was still healthy enough to travel. "I'll get you some clothes," Luke said. "Karen's things might fit. I kept them." "Thank you," Isabella said softly. Luke headed upstairs, pausing at Maddie's door to listen. Her soft breathing continued undisturbed. He gathered sweatpants and a t-shirt from the boxes in the closet he couldn't bring himself to donate, grabbed a spare towel, and returned downstairs. Isabella had moved to the living room window, peering through the blinds at the empty street. "See anything?" he asked. "Not yet." She accepted the clothes gratefully. "Would it be okay if I showered? I can still feel their hands." "Of course. Bathroom's down the hall." While she showered, Luke made coffee, decaf because his hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline dump. He checked the locks, looked out each window, and tried to process what he'd just done. Brought a stranger home. A stranger who was clearly in serious trouble. A stranger whose presence might put Maddie in danger. "What were you thinking?" he muttered to himself. But he knew what he'd been thinking. He'd been thinking about the terror in her eyes. The way she'd fought alongside him instead of freezing. The broken laugh that said she was at the end of her rope. Isabella emerged 30 minutes later, Karen's clothes hanging loose on her smaller frame. Without the makeup and expensive dress, she looked younger, more vulnerable. She'd tried to tame her auburn hair into a ponytail, but damp strands escaped to frame her face. "Better?" Luke asked, handing her a mug of coffee. "Much." She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was anchoring her to reality. "Your wife had good taste in comfortable clothes." She was practical. Luke sat in his recliner, the one piece of furniture he'd bought new after Karen died because her chair hurt too much to keep. Said life was too short for uncomfortable pajamas. "Sounds wise." Isabella curled up on the couch, tucking her feet under her. "How long were you married?" 16 years. Met in high school, waited for me through 2 deployments, stuck by me through the adjustment when I came home. He took a sip of coffee. "She was the strong one, really. I just tried to keep up." "I'm sorry for your loss." "Me too." He studied her over his mug. "Your turn." "Who are you, Isabella? Who were those men?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "My last name is Carter. Isabella Carter." The name hit Luke like cold water. "Carter? As in Richard Carter? Carter Tech Industries?" She nodded miserably. "My father." Luke set down his mug carefully, his mind racing. Richard Carter was one of the richest men in America. Carter Tech had contracts with the Defense Department, owned stakes in everything from social media platforms to private military companies. The kind of man who bought senators like other people bought coffee. "Those men work for your father?" "Not officially. He calls them security consultants. They're supposed to protect me." Her laugh was bitter. "Protect the investment, more like. Keep the asset from depreciating in value." "Why were they trying to force you into a van?" "Because I ran." She met his eyes, and he saw steel beneath the fear. 3 days ago, I walked out of a boardroom where my father was negotiating my marriage to the son of his biggest competitor. A merger, he called it. A strategic alliance worth billions. He never even asked if I wanted it. Arranged marriage, in America, in 2025? Oh, it wouldn't be called that. We'd date publicly for a few months, a whirlwind romance the media would eat up. Then a fairy tale wedding, beautiful babies, and two companies becoming an unstoppable force. Her knuckles were white around the mug. I'm 28 years old, and I've never made a single decision about my own life. Where I lived, what I studied, who I dated, all carefully orchestrated for maximum benefit to the Carter empire. So you ran. So I ran. Took cash from my apartment safe, left my phone so they couldn't track me, got in my car and drove. I made it 3 days. She laughed, but tears were rolling down her cheeks. 3 whole days of freedom. Gas station coffee, cheap motels, choosing my own direction for once. It was the best 3 days of my life. Luke grabbed a box of tissues from the side table, Karen's last box that he'd never thrown away. Isabella took one gratefully. Your father sent those men to bring you back? He doesn't see it as kidnapping. In his mind, I'm having a breakdown. Poor little rich girl can't handle the pressure. They're just helping me get the treatment I need. She dabbed at her eyes. By tomorrow, there'll probably be a press release about my exhaustion and upcoming stay at a wellness retreat. Then once I'm back under control, the wedding plans will proceed. That's insane. That's power, real power, the kind that rewrites reality to suit its needs. She looked at him steadily. Which is why you should drive me to the bus station first thing in the morning. Those men will be back, and they'll have my father's full resources behind them. You don't want any part of this. Luke thought about that. The smart play was exactly what she said. Get her on a bus, forget this happened, go back to his simple life of overtime shifts and raising Maddie. But he kept seeing the fear in her eyes, the desperation, and something else. The way she'd fought back, the strength beneath the designer exterior. You always fight like that? He asked. The question surprised her. What? Back at the gas station. You handled yourself pretty well. That wasn't just self-defense class at the country club. A small smile touched her lips. Krav Maga. 3 years. My one rebellion. I told my father it was Pilates. He never checked. Smart. Luke made a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. Look, stay tonight. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out a plan that doesn't involve bus stations or wellness retreats. Luke, you don't understand what you're offering. My father is just a man. Rich, powerful, connected, sure, but still just a man. Luke stood, suddenly exhausted. I've faced worse than rich bullies. Get some sleep, Isabella. You're safe tonight. He headed for the stairs, pausing when she called his name. Luke? Why are you doing this? Really? He thought about it, then gave her the truth. Because everyone deserves a choice about their own life, and because someone needs to stand up to men who think money means they own people. He smiled slightly. Plus, I really didn't like those guys. Her laugh was soft, but genuine this time. Thank you. Thank me tomorrow when we figure out how to keep you free. Luke climbed the stairs to his room, checked on Maddie once more, then lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in America. His simple life, work, Maddie, bills, repeat, had exploded into something from a movie. But as he finally drifted toward sleep, he couldn't shake the image of Isabella fighting beside him, fierce and desperate and brave. Everyone deserved a chance to choose their own path. If helping her choose hers meant trouble for him, well, he'd faced trouble before. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but it immediately rang again and again. On the 4th call, he answered. Mr. Callahan. The voice was smooth, cultured, with undertones that suggested boardrooms and power lunches. My name is Marcus Webb. I work for Mr. Richard Carter. I believe you may have encountered my associates this evening. If by encountered you mean stopped them from kidnapping a woman, then yeah. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Miss Carter has been under considerable stress. She needs professional help, which her family is trying to provide. Funny, she seemed pretty clear-headed when she was fighting off your associates. There was a pause. Mr. Callahan, you seem like a reasonable man, a working man with responsibilities, a daughter to raise, bills to pay. Mr. Carter is prepared to be generous in exchange for your cooperation. Shall we say $75,000? simply for ensuring Miss Carter gets the help she needs. Luke sat up in bed. 75,000. Enough to pay off the mortgage, get Maddie through college, maybe even take a breath for the first time since Karen's medical bills buried them. Mr. Callahan? I'm thinking. It's a generous offer. More than generous, considering you've known Miss Carter for what, an hour? 2? That was true. Isabella was a stranger. Her problems weren't his problems. $75,000 for one night's interference, many would call him a fool for refusing. Mr. Callahan, I need an answer. Luke thought about Isabella downstairs, finally feeling safe enough to sleep. About Maddie, who he'd raised to stand up for others. About Karen, who'd always said integrity was the one thing no one could take from you. You had to give it away. Tell Mr. Carter to go to hell. I'm sorry? Actually, tell him to go to hell and take his money with him. Isabella is a grown woman who makes her own choices. If she wants to leave, she can call you herself. This is a mistake, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Carter is not a man who accepts defiance well. Then he's going to have to learn. Don't call again. Luke hung up and turned off his phone. His hands were steady now, his mind clear. Whatever came next, at least he'd be able to look at himself in the mirror. A soft knock at his door made him tense. Dad? Maddie's voice, thick with sleep. I heard voices. He opened the door to find his daughter in her oversized Steelers jersey, hair a mess of tangled brown curls. Just a wrong number, sweetheart. Why are you up? Needed water. She peered at him with Karen's eyes, sharp, missing nothing. You okay? You look weird. Just tired. Long shift. She didn't look convinced. Is someone downstairs? I heard the shower running. Luke hesitated. Maddie was smart, too smart to lie too effectively. A friend needed a place to crash. She'll be gone tomorrow. She? Maddie's eyebrows rose. Dad, do you have a girlfriend? What? No, it's not like that. She just needed help. Maddie studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. Okay, but if you do get a girlfriend, you have to tell me. We agreed. No secrets about important stuff. Deal. Now back to bed. Night, Dad. Love you. Love you too, kiddo. She padded back to her room, and Luke returned to his bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Every car that passed made him tense. Every sound could be them returning. He'd drawn a line in the sand, and men like Richard Carter didn't tolerate lines. Finally, around 5 a.m., exhaustion won. He dozed fitfully, dreams full of black vans and harder choices yet to come. The sound of breaking glass yanked him awake. Luke rolled out of bed, feet hitting the floor in a combat crouch. Gray dawn light filtered through the windows. He grabbed the baseball bat from behind his door, Maddie's from when she still played Little League, and moved silently down the hall. Another crash from downstairs, followed by Isabella's voice, I said I'm fine! Luke took the stairs 3 at a time, bat raised, ready for a fight. But the kitchen wasn't full of Carter's men. Instead, Isabella stood amid broken dishes, trying to clean up what looked like an attempted breakfast gone wrong. Eggs were splattered on the floor, coffee grounds everywhere, and she had somehow managed to burn toast so badly the smoke detector was chirping. She looked up at him, mortified. I wanted to make breakfast, to say thank you, but your toaster is apparently possessed, and I may have never actually used a non-digital coffee maker before, and... She gestured helplessly at the mess. I'm so sorry. Luke lowered the bat, adrenaline giving way to something between amusement and sympathy. It's okay. Here, let me... Dad? Maddie appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with wide eyes. What happened? I happened, Isabella said, pushing hair out of her face and leaving a streak of flour across her cheek. I'm a natural disaster in human form, apparently. Maddie looked from Isabella to her father, processing. You're the friend who needed help? That's me. Isabella attempted a smile. Isabella, you must be Maddie. Yeah. Maddie grabbed the broom from the corner, matter of fact. Don't worry about it. Dad destroys the kitchen like once a week. We're used to it. I do not, Luke started. Last Tuesday, spaghetti explosion, Maddie interrupted, starting to sweep. Sunday before that, the Great Pancake Disaster of 2025. Isabella laughed. A real laugh this time. Sounds like I'm in good company then. They cleaned together, an oddly domestic scene that felt both surreal and strangely right. Maddie peppered Isabella with questions. Where was she from? What did she do? How did she know Luke? And Isabella deflected with partial truths. From New York, between jobs, met Luke when her car broke down. Must have been some breakdown, Maddie said, eyes sharp like her mother's. Considering you're wearing Mom's clothes. Silence fell like a hammer. Isabella went pale. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Luke said I could. It's okay, Maddie said quickly. Mom would have wanted them to be useful. She hated waste. She looked at her father. Right, Dad? Right, Luke managed, throat tight. They salvaged breakfast. Luke took over cooking while Isabella was relegated to setting the table under Maddie's supervision. As they ate, Luke watched his daughter slowly warm to Isabella, the natural suspicion giving way to curiosity. Isabella, for her part, treated Maddie like an equal, not a child, answering her increasingly probing questions with grace. So you're rich, right? Maddie asked suddenly, making Luke choke on his coffee. Maddie! What? She is! Look at her hands. Professional manicure probably costs more than our grocery bill. Her watch is trying to hide under Mom's sleeve, but I can see it. That's like a Cartier or something. And she doesn't know how to use basic kitchen appliances, which means she's always had people to do that stuff. Isabella set down her fork carefully. You're very observant. Mom was a nurse. She taught me to notice details. Maddie's expression was serious beyond her years. So why are you really here? Rich people don't have cars that break down in Millfield. They have drivers and backup plans and definitely better places to stay than our couch. Luke started to intervene, but Isabella held up a hand. She deserves the truth, or at least part of it. She met Maddie's eyes. You're right, I come from money, a lot of it. But that money came with strings, and those strings were strangling me. So I cut them and ran. Your dad helped me when some people tried to drag me back. Like, actually drag? Actually drag. Maddie looked at her father with something like awe. You got in a fight? Dad, you haven't been in a fight since I got home, Luke finished, and I'd like to keep it that way. But these people, they'll come here, Maddie asked. Luke and Isabella exchanged glances. Maybe, Luke admitted. Probably. Then Isabella should stay, Maddie announced, until she figures out where to go. We can't just send her back out there alone. Sweetheart, it's complicated. No, it's not. Maddie's jaw set in a way that was pure Karen. Someone needs help. We help. That's what you taught me. That's what Mom would do. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. They all froze. Luke checked his watch, 7:47 a.m., too early for visitors in Millfield. Upstairs, he told Isabella. Both of you. Dad, now. They moved quickly, Maddie grabbing Isabella's hand and pulling her toward the stairs. Luke waited until he heard Maddie's bedroom door close, then approached the front door, bat still in hand. Through the peephole, he saw a man in an expensive suit, definitely not local. Behind him, 3 black SUVs idled in the driveway. Luke opened the door but kept the chain on. Can I help you? The man smiled, white teeth, cold eyes. Mr. Callahan, my name is Harrison Pike. I'm Mr. Carter's chief of staff. May I come in? No. The smile didn't waver. I understand there was some unpleasantness last night. Mr. Carter wanted me to apologize personally for the behavior of our security team. They exceeded their authority. Assault and attempted kidnapping usually does exceed authority, yeah. Quite. Pike produced an envelope from his jacket. Mr. Carter would like to resolve this situation amicably. Inside this envelope is a check for $100,000. All we ask is that you allow us to speak with Isabella. Just speak. If she chooses to remain here after that conversation, we'll leave. Luke eyed the envelope like it might bite. And if I say no? Pike's smile finally faded. Mr. Callahan, you seem like an intelligent man. You must understand the position you're in. Mr. Carter owns significant stakes in Millfield Steel. A word from him could accelerate the plant's closure. Your job, the jobs of your neighbors, gone. Your mortgage is held by First National Bank. Carter Tech is their largest shareholder. Your daughter attends Millfield Middle School, which receives a generous grant from the Carter Foundation each year. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm explaining reality. Mr. Carter doesn't want to be your enemy, but if you insist on interfering with his family affairs, Pike shrugged eloquently. Luke felt rage building, the kind he'd worked years to control. Get off my property. Mr. Callahan, I said get off my property, now. And tell Richard Carter that if he wants to talk to his daughter, he can come himself, not send his lackeys to threaten working families. Pike's expression hardened. This is a mistake. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Now leave before I call the real cops, not the rental ones you probably have on speed dial. Pike turned without another word, walked to the middle SUV, and climbed in. The vehicles pulled out slowly, deliberately, making sure Luke saw their presence, their power. Luke closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. He'd just declared war on a billionaire, over a woman he'd known less than 12 hours. They're gone, he called up the stairs. Isabella and Maddie came down, Isabella pale and shaken, Maddie vibrating with excitement. That was awesome, Maddie exclaimed. You totally faced him down. Did you see his face when… Madison, Luke's tone stopped her cold. This isn't a game. These are dangerous people. I know, but no buts. You're going to school. Normal day. If anyone approaches you that you don't know, you run and you scream and you call 911, understood? Maddie's excitement dimmed. Yes, sir. Isabella, we need to… Luke's phone rang. The screen showed his supervisor's name. His stomach dropped as he answered. Luke, Jim here. Listen, I've got some bad news. Corporate just called. They're accelerating the closure timeline. Last shift is Friday. Friday? That's 3 days from now. I know. It's bullshit. They're offering a severance package, but only if you sign by end of business today. Otherwise, nothing. Luke closed his eyes. Carter worked fast. How much? 2 weeks' pay. That's it? That's it. I'm sorry, Luke. This came from the very top. Nothing I can do. Luke hung up without saying goodbye. Isabella had gone even paler. That was because of me, she said quietly. That was because your father is a vindictive ass, Luke corrected. Maddie, get ready for school. But now, sweetheart, she went, casting worried looks back at them. When they heard her door close, Isabella turned to Luke. I'll leave, right now. Maybe if I go… He'll still close the plant, still come after me for defying him. Luke ran a hand through his hair. Besides, you leaving doesn't help the real problem. Which is that he thinks he can buy or bully anyone into submission. Luke met her eyes. I've fought men like him before. Different uniforms, same mentality. They only understand one thing, strength. You want to fight Richard Carter? He has more lawyers than you have friends. More money than this entire town will see in a lifetime. Maybe, but he also has a weakness. What? You. He needs you for this merger. Without you, his grand plan falls apart. Luke smiled grimly. So we make him come to the table. On our terms. Isabella shook her head. You don't know him. He doesn't negotiate. He wins. Everyone negotiates when they have no choice. Luke pulled out his phone. I may not have lawyers and money, but I do have something. What? Friends who know how to make noise. He scrolled through his contacts, found the number he wanted. Mike? It's Luke Callahan. Remember that favor you owe me from Kandahar? I'm calling it in. Isabella watched as Luke made call after call, his voice confident, persuasive. By the time Maddie came down for school, he'd set something in motion. What are you doing? Isabella asked as Maddie gathered her backpack. Fighting back. Your father wants to play hardball? Fine. But we're not playing in his boardroom. We're playing in the court of public opinion. A car honked outside. Maddie's friend's mom. Regular carpool. Be careful, Luke told his daughter, hugging her tight. You too, she whispered back. Then louder, to Isabella. Don't let him do anything too stupid. He thinks he's still a soldier sometimes. I'll do my best, Isabella promised. After Maddie left, Luke turned to Isabella. We need to get you somewhere safer than here, and we need to do it before… The sound of vehicles approaching cut him off. Not SUVs this time. News vans. 3 of them, pulling up to the curb. "What did you do?" Isabella asked. "Called in that favor. Mike Reeves works for Channel 7 now, investigative reporter. I told him I had Richard Carter's runaway daughter and a story about arranged marriages and corporate tyranny." "Luke, no. This will make everything worse, or it'll make him back off. Men like your father hate scrutiny, bad for the stock price." Luke watched as reporters and camera crews piled out. "Your choice, Isabella. We can send them away, you can run, keep running forever, or we stand and fight." Isabella watched the reporters setting up, her expression cycling through fear, uncertainty, and finally, determination. "If we do this, he'll destroy you. Your job, your reputation, everything." "Job's already gone. Reputation." Luke shrugged. "I'm a nobody from nowhere, not much to destroy." "You're not a nobody," Isabella said fiercely. "You're the only person in my entire life who stood up for me without wanting something in return. So, what's it going to be?" She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and for a moment Luke saw the woman she could be without fear. "Let's give them a show." They walked out together to meet the cameras, Isabella still in Karen's old clothes, Luke in his work flannel. The reporters surged forward, questions flying. "Miss Carter, is it true you've run away from an arranged marriage?" "Mr. Callahan, what's your relationship with Isabella Carter? Has Richard Carter threatened you?" Luke held up a hand for silence. "We'll give one statement, then we're done. Isabella?" She stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "My name is Isabella Carter. 3 days ago, I left my father's house because he was attempting to force me into a marriage I didn't want for business purposes. When I refused to return voluntarily, his security team attempted to abduct me. This man," she gestured to Luke, "a complete stranger, saved me. And now my father is threatening his livelihood and this entire town because someone finally told him no." The reporters exploded with follow-up questions, but Luke was already guiding Isabella back inside. Through the window, they watched the circus outside grow as more media arrived. Within an hour, # Carter scandal was trending. Within 2, Richard Carter's office had issued a denial and a statement about Isabella's mental health crisis. "He's going to come himself now," Isabella said quietly. "You've challenged him publicly. He can't let that stand." "Good. Let him come." Luke's phone was ringing nonstop. Reporters, unknown numbers, even a few supportive texts from coworkers who'd heard about the plant closure. At least now it's in the open. But as the day wore on, Luke began to understand what he'd really started. The reporters on the lawn were joined by Carter's security teams in their black SUVs. Neighbors peered from windows. His supervisor called to formally fire him, effective immediately. The school called. Maddie was fine, but they were concerned about the situation. "I've made it worse," Luke said as afternoon shadows grew long. "I thought if we went public—" "You gave me something I've never had," Isabella interrupted. "A choice, and someone willing to fight beside me." She touched his arm gently. "Whatever happens now, thank you for that." Before Luke could respond, the circus outside went silent. The reporters turned as one toward the street, cameras lifting. A motorcade was approaching, not just SUVs this time, but a full convoy with a limousine at its center. Richard Carter had come to Millfield. The man who emerged from the limousine looked exactly like his photos, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, radiating the kind of power that bent reality around it. He walked through the reporters like they were furniture, his security creating a bubble of space. He stopped at Luke's front gate and waited. "He expects us to come to him," Isabella said, her voice small. "Then he can keep waiting." Luke didn't move from the window. They watched as Carter stood there, patient as stone. The reporters were going wild, but his security kept them back. Finally, after 5 full minutes, Carter approached the door himself. The knock was soft, almost polite. Luke opened the door wide this time, no chain. "Mr. Carter." "Mr. Callahan." Carter's voice was like aged whiskey, smooth, expensive, with a bite underneath. "May I speak with my daughter?" "That's up to her." Carter's eyes flicked past Luke to where Isabella stood. "Isabella, this has gone far enough." "Has it?" Isabella moved to stand beside Luke. "I've only been gone 3 days. 3 days of embarrassment, speculation, and a precipitous drop in our stock value." Carter's expression was cold. Your tantrum has cost shareholders millions. My freedom is a tantrum? Your freedom? Carter laughed, a sound with no humor. You've never worked a day in your life. Every comfort, every opportunity, every door that's opened for you, all because of the Carter name. And this is how you repay it? I never asked for any of it. No, you simply enjoyed it. The best schools, the finest clothes, trips around the world, all paid for by the very empire you now reject. I'll pay it all back, Isabella said. Every penny. Just let me go. It's not about money. Carter's mask slipped, showing genuine anger underneath. It's about family, legacy, responsibility. It's about control, Luke interjected. Carter's gaze shifted to him, and Luke felt the full weight of that attention, like being targeted by a predator. Ah, yes, the hero. Tell me, Mr. Callahan, what did my daughter promise you? Money? Connection? Or something more personal? Dad. Isabella's face flushed with anger. What? It's a reasonable question. A man doesn't throw away his job and future for nothing. Maybe that's the difference between us, Luke said evenly. I know some things are worth more than money. How poetic. Tell me, will your daughter appreciate that poetry when you can't afford her college? When you lose this house? Carter smiled coldly. I've done my research, Mr. Callahan. Widower, barely making ends meet, one daughter who shows exceptional academic promise. Young Madison, isn't it? Straight A's, wants to be a doctor like her mother. Such dreams require funding. Stay away from my daughter. I have no interest in your daughter, but actions have consequences. You've chosen to interfere in my family's affairs. The resulting difficulties are on your head. The plant closure. That affects hundreds of families, not just mine. Carter shrugged. Collateral damage. The plant was dying anyway. I simply accelerated the timeline. All because I helped your daughter? All because you defied me. Carter's voice hardened. I offered you money. You refused. I offered you a peaceful resolution. You chose publicity. Now we're here. Where exactly is here? Isabella asked. Carter pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then showed them the screen. Here is where your new friend has approximately 6 hours before his mortgage is called in. Where the IRS receives an anonymous tip about unreported income from his military contractor days. A lie. But the audit alone will be devastating. Where young Madison's scholarship recommendations mysteriously disappear. Well, Luke felt rage building, but Isabella grabbed his arm before he could move. Stop, she told her father. Please, you've made your point. Have I? Then come home. Now. The merger announcement is tomorrow. And if I refuse, then Mr. Callahan learns what it truly costs to stand against me. Carter's eyes were pitiless. I will systematically destroy everything he's built, everyone he cares about. Legally, of course, but thoroughly. The silence stretched taut. Luke could feel Isabella trembling beside him, caught between her freedom and his destruction. Don't, he told her quietly. Don't give in to him. Luke, I've been through worse. Maddie and I will manage. No, Isabella said, stronger now. She faced her father. I have a counteroffer. Carter raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. I disagree. You need me for this merger. Without me, it falls apart. She lifted her chin. Give me 1 week. 1 week to prove I can make it on my own, without the Carter name or money. If I succeed, you let me go. Permanently. And if you fail, then I come home. Do the merger. Play the perfect daughter. Carter considered. And him? Leave Luke and his family alone, regardless of what happens. You're asking me to spare a man who's humiliated me publicly. I'm asking you to be the bigger man, to show that Richard Carter can be magnanimous in victory. Luke saw the calculation in Carter's eyes, the PR value of mercy versus the satisfaction of destruction. 1 week, Carter said finally. Starting now. No Carter resources, no credit cards, no calling in favors from family friends. You work, you survive, you prove you can stand on your own feet without my name or money. Agreed. But he goes back to his life. No more interference, no more public statements. Isabella looked at Luke, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. Agreed, she said. Carter smiled, the smile of a predator who knows the prey is only delaying the inevitable. 1 week, then. Harrison will monitor your progress. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Isabella? When you fail, and you will fail, remember that I offered you comfort and chose hardship. Your suffering is entirely self-inflicted. He walked back to his limousine, the reporters surging forward with questions he ignored. The motorcade pulled away, leaving chaos in its wake. Luke closed the door, the sudden quiet ringing in his ears. You shouldn't have done that, he said. A week isn't enough time to what? Prove I can survive without being a Carter? Isabella's eyes were fierce. Watch me. Where will you even start? You need a job, a place to live. Then I'd better get started. She pulled out the cheap prepaid phone she'd bought during her escape. First, I need to find work. Any ideas? Luke thought about it. The diner's always hiring, retail places too. But Isabella, these jobs, they're hard. Long hours, minimum wage. I know. She was already scrolling through job listings. But it's honest work, and it's my choice. You could stay here for the week. She shook her head. Your father was clear. You go back to your life. That means I can't involve you further. But where will you go? Mrs. Patterson rents rooms, Isabella said, surprising him. I saw the sign when we drove through town. $40 a night. I have enough cash for a few days. After that, she shrugged. I'll figure it out. Luke wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. This was her fight now, her chance to prove herself. At least let me drive you there. The reporters will follow anyway. Might as well make it easy on them. They gathered Isabella's few belongings, the clothes she'd arrived in, now clean and dried, and a bag with some of Karen's clothes that Luke insisted she take. As they prepared to leave, Luke's phone rang. Maddie's school. Mr. Callahan? This is Principal Morrison. We have a situation. Some reporters tried to interview Madison during lunch. We've had to lock down. I'm on my way. Luke grabbed his keys, then looked at Isabella. Go, she said. Your daughter needs you. Come with me. After I get Maddie, I'll drop you at Mrs. Patterson's. They drove through the gauntlet of reporters, Luke stone-faced and silent. The school was indeed surrounded by news vans. Luke parked and started to get out, but Isabella stopped him. Let me handle them. You get Maddie. Before he could protest, she was out of the truck, walking straight toward the largest cluster of reporters. I'll give you 5 minutes of questions if you leave the school alone, she announced. These children didn't ask for any of this. The reporters swarmed her, and Luke used the distraction to slip into the school. He found Maddie in the principal's office, looking small and scared. Dad! He pulled her into a hug. You okay? They kept asking about Isabella, about you. I didn't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Come on, let's go home. They slipped out a side door and circled back to the truck. Isabella was still holding court with the reporters, answering questions with a poise that seemed to grow stronger with each word. When she saw them, she wrapped up quickly and joined them in the truck. You okay? She asked Maddie. Yeah, that was kind of badass what you did, drawing them off like that. Language, Luke warned, but his heart wasn't in it. They drove to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, a Victorian that had seen better days but was clean and respectable. Mrs. Patterson herself, 70 if she was a day, took one look at the situation and clucked her tongue. You're the Carter girl everyone's talking about. Yes, ma'am. Running from your daddy? Something like that. Mrs. Patterson studied her shrewdly. Can you work? I can learn. The older woman considered. 40 a night, but I'll cut it to 20 if you help with cleaning and breakfast prep. 4:30 a.m. sharp. Deal. Isabella shook her hand firmly. No visitors after 9, no parties, no drugs. Break my rules, you're out. Understood. Mrs. Patterson handed her a key. Room 3, second floor, bathrooms down the hall. Luke helped carry her few things upstairs. The room was small but clean, single bed, dresser, small table by the window overlooking Main Street. It's perfect, Isabella said, and meant it. Isabella, don't. She touched his arm. You've done more than enough. Now I need to prove I can do this. It's not about proving anything. Your worth isn't measured by whether you can survive poverty. No, but my character is measured by whether I can stand on my own feet. She smiled sadly. I've been a decoration my whole life, Luke. Beautiful, educated, completely useless. This week, it's my chance to be real. Luke understood that. The need to prove yourself, to know your own strength. He'd felt it when he'd joined the army, when he'd come home, when he'd had to learn to be a single parent. If you need anything, I know where to find you. He left her there, standing in that small room with her chin raised and her eyes bright with determination. As he and Maddie drove home, his daughter was quiet. She's going to be okay, right? Maddie finally asked. I think so. She's stronger than she knows. Are we going to be okay, with Mr. Carter threatening everything? Luke reached over and squeezed her hand. We're going to be fine. We've been through worse. But as they pulled into their driveway, Luke saw the notice taped to his door. Mortgage review, effective immediately. Carter wasn't waiting for Isabella to fail. He was hedging his bets. That night, Luke sat at his kitchen table with bills spread before him, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how to survive without a job. Savings would last maybe 2 months if they cut everything non-essential. The severance, if he signed away his rights, would add 2 weeks. Unemployment would help, but not enough. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Got a job, Sal's Diner, morning shift, starts tomorrow. Thank you for everything. He smiled despite their situation. She was fighting. The least he could do was fight too. He pulled out his laptop and started updating his resume. If Carter wanted a war, he'd get one, but it would be fought with determination and dignity, not dirty tricks and threats. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, Luke Callahan allowed himself a moment of pride. He'd stood up to a bully, helped someone in need, and shown his daughter that some things were worth fighting for. The week had begun. The alarm shrieked at 4:15 a.m., and Isabella fumbled in the darkness of her small room, muscles already aching from yesterday's job hunt that had taken her to every establishment on Main Street. Her feet hit the cold floor, and she dressed quickly in the clothes Luke had given her, Karen's old jeans and a faded sweater that smelled faintly of lavender and memory. Through her window, Main Street lay empty except for the lone streetlight that flickered like it was struggling to stay awake too. Mrs. Patterson was already in the kitchen when Isabella stumbled down, the older woman's gray hair pinned in a neat bun, her movements efficient despite her age. Coffee's on the stove, she said without looking up from the eggs she was cracking. You know how to make pancake batter? I can learn, Isabella said, the phrase becoming her motto. Rich girls. But Mrs. Patterson's tone held amusement rather than contempt. Mix is in the pantry, instructions on the box. We've got 12 guests this morning, plus the regulars who come for breakfast. Don't make me regret this. Isabella found the mix, read the instructions twice, then began measuring carefully. Her hands, which had once held champagne flutes at gallery openings, now gripped a wooden spoon, stirring batter in a chipped ceramic bowl. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd attended a Swiss finishing school where they'd taught her 6 ways to fold a napkin, but never how to crack an egg. Too thick, Mrs. Patterson observed, glancing over. Add more milk, and stop stirring like you're afraid of it. Put some muscle in it. By the time the guests began arriving at 6, Isabella had burned 3 batches of pancakes, undercooked 2, and finally produced something edible. Her hair was escaping from her ponytail, flour dusted her cheek, and she'd never felt more accomplished. Not terrible, Mrs. Patterson admitted, which Isabella was learning was high praise. At 7 sharp, she rushed out the door, still pulling on her jacket, racing the 8 blocks to Sal's Diner for her first shift. The diner was exactly what you'd expect in a dying mill town. Red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, a counter worn smooth by decades of elbows, and a coffee maker that looked like it had survived both world wars. Sal himself was a mountain of a man with forearms like ham hocks, and a face that suggested he'd been a boxer before he'd been a cook. He looked Isabella up and down, taking in her designer boots, the only shoes she had, and her nervous energy. You ever waitressed before? No, but I can learn. Yeah, Dottie said. He jerked his thumb toward a woman in her 50s with bleached blonde hair and a smile that had seen too many double shifts. She'll train you. Don't drop anything, don't mix up orders, and don't cry in front of customers. Save it for the walk-in freezer like everyone else. Dottie handed her an apron that had seen better decades and a notepad. Honey, you picked a hell of a day to start. It's Thursday. What's wrong with Thursday? Senior special, every blue hair in the county comes for the early bird. Dottie grinned. Think or swim time, princess. The next 3 hours were a blur of coffee pots, order tickets, and elderly customers who wanted their eggs exactly right and weren't shy about sending them back. Isabella's feet screamed in her inappropriate boots. Her back ached from carrying heavy trays, and she mixed up orders twice, earning a blistering commentary from Sal that could have peeled paint. But she didn't quit. She smiled at the customers, even the cranky ones. She learned to balance 4 plates on her arms. She discovered that Mr. Henderson always wanted his coffee with 1 sugar, not 2, and that Mrs. Kowalski would tip an extra $1 if you asked about her grandchildren. During a brief lull, she was refilling salt shakers when the bell over the door chimed. Her stomach dropped as Harrison Pike walked in, Carter's chief of staff, immaculate in his $1,000 suit. He took a booth by the window, his presence like a dark cloud in the homey atmosphere. "I'll take that table," Dottie said quietly, but Isabella shook her head. "No. He's here for me." She walked over, notepad ready. "What can I get you?" Pike smiled that cold smile she remembered. "Coffee, black, and a moment of your time." "I'm working." "How industrious." He looked around the diner with barely concealed disdain. "Day 1 of your little experiment. Your father wanted me to remind you that the offer stands. 1 word, and you're back in comfort. Is that all? Because I have actual customers to serve. You know you can't win this. A week of playing working class won't change who you are." Isabella leaned in slightly, her voice low but fierce. "You're right. It won't change who I am. I've always been someone who wanted to make my own choices. This week just proves I can." She poured his coffee with a steady hand, though inside she was shaking. Pike left a $100 bill for his $2 coffee. Isabella picked it up, walked to the register, and made change. She brought him $98 in small bills and coins, counting it out slowly. "Your change, sir." His eyes narrowed. "Keep it." "I don't need your charity, or his." She left the money on the table and walked away. Pike left without touching the cash. Sal scooped it up later and put it in the tip jar to be split among the staff. "Girls got backbone," he muttered, which from Sal was practically a declaration of love. Her shift ended at 2, and Isabella's entire body felt like she'd been beaten with sticks. But she had $37 in tips in her apron pocket. Her money, earned with her work. She'd never been prouder of $37 in her life. Walking back to Mrs. Patterson's, she passed the grocery store and stopped. $37. She needed to eat for a week, pay Mrs. Patterson, save for next week if she won her freedom. The math was impossible, but she went in anyway. Bread, peanut butter, the cheapest jelly, ramen noodles, 5 for $1, a bag of apples that were slightly bruised but perfectly edible. She stood in the checkout line behind a woman with 2 small children, counting food stamps, and felt a shame so profound it nearly knocked her over. Not shame at her own situation, but shame that she'd lived 28 years without understanding that this was reality for millions of people. That while she'd complained about the wrong vintage of champagne at charity galas, mothers were calculating whether they could afford both milk and bread. $14.73, the cashier said. Isabella counted out the bills carefully, aware of Pike's Mercedes still idling outside, watching her through the window. Let him watch. Let him report back that Richard Carter's daughter was buying ramen noodles and bruised apples. She'd wear it like armor. Back in her room, she sat on the narrow bed and ate a peanut butter sandwich that tasted like victory. Her phone, the prepaid one, buzzed. A text from Luke. How was the first day? She wanted to tell him everything, about the pancakes and the rude customers and Pike's visit, and the profound exhaustion that went bone deep. Instead, she typed, "Survived. How's Maddie?" "Worried about you. We both are." "Don't be. I'm tougher than I look." "Never doubted it." She smiled at that, then set the phone aside. She had 4 hours before she needed to help Mrs. Patterson with dinner prep. Apparently, part of her reduced rent arrangement. 4 hours to rest her feet, ice her back, and figure out how to make $37 stretch impossibly far. A knock at her door interrupted her calculations. She opened it to find a woman about her age with bright purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. "You're the runaway princess," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "I prefer Isabella." "I'm Zoe. I'm in room 5. Heard you were looking for work." "I have a job. At Sal's." Zoe snorted. "One job? In this economy? Honey, you need at least 2 to make rent. I work nights at the distribution center. They're always hiring, 12-hour shifts, but it's 15 an hour. Isabella did quick math. 15 an hour, even part-time, would make the difference between surviving and failing. "What's the work?" "Loading trucks, unloading trucks, moving boxes that weigh more than you do. It's brutal, but they don't ask questions and they pay weekly." "How do I apply?" "Show up at 10 tonight. Ask for Tommy. Tell him Zoe sent you." She looked Isabella up and down. "You got work boots?" "No." Zoe sighed. "You're a 7? 7.5? 7. "Wait here." She returned 2 minutes later with a pair of battered steel-toed boots. "They're ugly as sin, but they'll keep you from breaking your toes. Consider it a loan." Isabella took the boots, surprised by the kindness. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same shit. Running from something, trying to prove something, not sure if you're strong enough." Zoe shrugged. "Plus, anybody who tells Richard Carter to stuff it deserves some help. Man's a parasite." "You know about my father?" "Honey, everyone knows. Carter Tech owns half this town one way or another. The plant, the bank, hell, even the hospital where they'll take you when you collapse from exhaustion." Zoe's smile was sharp. "So watching his princess daughter slum it with us peasants? That's better than cable." Isabella should have been offended, but she found herself laughing instead. "Glad I can provide entertainment." "Entertainment and hope," Zoe corrected. "You standing up to him? It matters. Even if you don't make it the week, it matters that you tried." After Zoe left, Isabella tried on the boots. They were indeed ugly, scarred and stained from hard use, but they fit. She set her alarm for 9:30 p.m. and tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing. 1 day down, 6 to go. She'd made $57 if you counted the tips, spent 14 on food, 20 to Mrs. Patterson for tonight. That left $23. If she got the warehouse job, if she could physically handle both jobs, if nothing went wrong. The math still didn't work, but she was too tired to care. She woke to her alarm feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, every muscle protesting. But she pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, laced up Zoe's boots, and walked the 2 miles to the distribution center on the outskirts of town. The building was massive, lit by harsh sodium lights that turned everything orange. Trucks backed up to loading bays while forklifts buzzed around like angry wasps. Isabella found the office and asked for Tommy, who turned out to be a skinny kid who looked barely old enough to shave. "Zoe sent you?" He looked skeptical. "You ever done warehouse work?" "No." "Ever done any physical labor?" "Not really." He sighed. "Can you lift 50 pounds?" "I can try." "Jesus." He rubbed his face. "Look, I got 3 trucks that need unloading tonight and 2 guys called in sick. You make it through the shift. You got a job. You don't. Nice knowing you." He handed her a pair of work gloves and a safety vest, then led her to Bay 7, where a mountain of boxes waited. "These go on pallets, sorted by the color codes. Red stays here. Blue goes to Bay 3, green to Bay 5. Don't mix them up, don't drop anything marked fragile, and don't get run over by a forklift." The first box she lifted nearly sent her to her knees. It was marked 40 pounds, but felt like 100. By the 10th box, her arms were shaking. By the 20th, she'd figured out how to lift with her legs. By the 50th, she'd stopped counting and just focused on the rhythm. Lift, carry, stack. Lift, carry, stack. "You're doing it wrong." A voice made her look up. A massive black man with arms like tree trunks was watching her. "You're going to blow out your back like that." "I'm managing." "No, you're surviving. There's a difference." He demonstrated a better technique. "Use your whole body, not just your arms, and pace yourself. This ain't a sprint." "Thanks." "Marcus." He held out a gloved hand. "Isabella." "I know who you are. Whole town's talking about the billionaire's daughter working at Sal's." He grinned. Didn't think you'd last the lunch rush, but Dottie says you did okay. News travels fast. Small town. Not much else to talk about since the plant closure got announced. His expression darkened. Your father's doing, right? Isabella hesitated, then nodded. Partly. He moved up the timeline because of me. She expected anger, but Marcus just shrugged. Plant was dying anyway. Would have happened next year or the year after. At least this way we get to watch him squirm a little. Who? Your old man. Word is he's losing his mind that you won't come home. Stock price dropped another 2 points today. Isabella hadn't known that. She'd been too focused on surviving to think about the wider implications of her rebellion. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Marcus teaching her tricks to make the work easier, though nothing could make it easy. By 3 a.m., her shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold, and she'd developed blisters even through the gloves. Break time, Tommy called out. Isabella collapsed on a bench outside, gratefully accepting the bottle of water Marcus offered. Why are you really doing this? He asked. You could go home any time. Yeah, you'd have to marry some rich asshole, but that's better than killing yourself for 15 an hour. Isabella thought about how to answer. You ever feel like you're drowning in comfort? Like everything's so soft and easy that you can't tell if you're actually alive or just existing? Can't say that's been my problem. I know how that sounds, poor little rich girl, complaining about luxury. But when every choice is made for you, when every path is predetermined, when you're just a chess piece in someone else's game, that's a different kind of prison. Marcus was quiet for a moment. My daughter's 16, smart as hell, wants to go to college, be an engineer, but with the plant closing, I don't know how I'll afford it. That's my prison. Wanting to give her choices I can't pay for. What's her name? Jasmine. Tell her to apply for the Carter Foundation scholarship. Marcus laughed bitterly. Right. I'm sure your father would love that. The foundation has independent directors. My father doesn't review applications. Tell Jasmine to apply. Tell her to mention in her essay that she wants to use her engineering degree to help revitalize towns affected by industrial decline. You're serious? Dead serious. It's exactly the kind of thing the board loves. Plus, they have quotas to fill, diverse candidates from affected communities. She'd be perfect. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. I'm not what anyone expected, including myself. They went back to work, and Isabella pushed through the exhaustion, the pain, the voice in her head that said Pike was right. She couldn't do this. By 6 a.m., when the shift ended, she'd helped unload 3 trucks and load 2 more. Tommy handed her a time card. You coming back tomorrow? Every fiber of her being wanted to say no. Instead, she said, What time? 10 p.m. I'll be here. She walked back to Mrs. Patterson's as the sun rose, each step agony. She had 30 minutes before she needed to help with breakfast, then her shift at Sal's at 7. The math was simple and brutal. She'd worked 18 hours out of the last 24, but she'd earned it. Every dollar, every blister, every ache was hers. She splashed cold water on her face, changed clothes, and headed down to help Mrs. Patterson. The older woman took one look at her and pushed her into a chair. You look like death walking. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running on fumes and stubbornness. Mrs. Patterson poured her a cup of coffee so strong it could strip paint. The warehouse? How did you... Zoe mentioned it. That girl can't keep a secret to save her life. Mrs. Patterson studied her shrewdly. You know you're going to collapse if you keep this up. I have 6 more days. 6 more days of what? Proving you can kill yourself with work? Your father won't be impressed. He'll just see it as confirmation that you can't hack it in the real world. This isn't about impressing him. It's about proving something to myself. And what happens after the week? Say you manage it, say he lets you go. Then what? You going to work yourself to death for the rest of your life? Isabella hadn't thought that far ahead. Survival had narrowed her focus to the next shift, the next dollar, the next day. I don't know, she admitted. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. Eat something. You can't run on coffee and determination alone. She pushed a plate of eggs and toast in front of Isabella, who wanted to protest that she couldn't afford it, but Mrs. Patterson waved her off. Consider it part of your employment package. Can't have you passing out and giving me a bad reputation. Isabella ate mechanically, fuel for the machine her body had become. Then she helped with breakfast prep. She was getting better at the pancakes, before dragging herself to Sal's. The diner was busier than yesterday, and Isabella's exhaustion made her clumsy. She dropped a tray of dishes, the crash silencing the entire restaurant. Sal's face turned red, and she braced for another tirade, but Dottie intervened. I'll clean it up. Isabella, take your break. I don't need... Take your break. Isabella stumbled into the alley behind the diner, legs shaking, vision blurring with exhaustion and unshed tears. She'd made it exactly 1.5 days, and she was already falling apart. You okay, hon? She looked up to find Luke standing there, concern written across his weathered face. What are you doing here? Came for coffee. Saw you through the window. You look like hell, I know. He leaned against the brick wall beside her. Heard you took the warehouse job, too. News really does travel fast here. Isabella, you don't have to prove anything by destroying yourself. Don't I? The tears came then, hot and angry. Everyone's watching, waiting for me to fail. Poor little princess, can't handle real work. I have to make it, Luke. I have to. No, you don't. His voice was gentle but firm. You already proved yourself the moment you stood up to him. Everything else is just details. Details that determine whether I get to have my own life or spend the rest of it as a business asset. Luke was quiet for a moment, then pulled something from his pocket, an envelope thick with cash. No, Isabella said immediately. I can't take your money. It's not mine. Collection taken up at the plant. The guys heard what you're trying to do, heard that their jobs ended early because of it. You'd think they'd be angry, but instead, he shrugged. They wanted to help. It's not much, maybe $300, but it might make the difference. Isabella stared at the envelope. I cost them their jobs. Your father cost them their jobs. You just gave them someone to root for. He pressed the envelope into her hands. Take it. Sometimes accepting help is harder than going it alone, but it's also braver. Before she could respond, Dottie stuck her head out the door. Break's over, princess. The lunch rush is starting. Luke squeezed her shoulder gently. You've got this. Isabella tucked the envelope into her apron, wiped her eyes, and went back to work. The lunch rush was brutal, but she found a rhythm, fueled by the knowledge that strangers, people whose lives were harder because of her father's vendetta, had still chosen to help her. She was refilling coffee for Mr. Henderson when the bell chimed and a woman walked in who made everyone stop and stare. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and an aura of money that changed the atmosphere of the diner like dropping ice into hot water. Victoria Ashford. The woman Isabella's father had chosen to be her future mother-in-law. She took a booth in Isabella's section, her smile sharp as crystal. Isabella, darling, how quaint. Isabella approached with her notepad, proud that her hands didn't shake. What can I get you, Mrs. Ashford? Oh, I'm not here for the cuisine. She looked around with barely concealed disgust. I'm here to deliver a message. I'm working. Yes, I can see that. Playing dress up with the common folk. How very Marie Antoinette of you. Victoria's smile could have cut glass. Your father asked me to remind you that actions have consequences. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. Is that a threat? It's a fact. For instance, did you know that Mr. Callahan's daughter attends Millfield Middle School? Such a bright girl. It would be a shame if the school lost its funding from the Carter Foundation. All those children suffering because of your selfish need for attention. Isabella's hand tightened on her pen until her knuckles went white. You wouldn't. I wouldn't have to. Your father is not a patient man, Isabella. Each day you persist in this charade, his anger grows. And angry men do regrettable things. Get out. I beg your pardon? I said get out. Isabella's voice carried across the diner. You're not welcome here? Victoria stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. You can't run forever, darling. Sooner or later, you'll realize that fighting your destiny is like fighting gravity, exhausting and ultimately pointless. She left, and the diner remained silent for a long moment before conversations gradually resumed. Sal appeared at Isabella's elbow. You okay, kid? I'm fine. That woman gives you any more trouble, she's banned. I don't care how much money she has. The feeling of being part of something larger than herself, of having people believe in her not because of her name or money, but because she was fighting for something that mattered. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but she recognized Victoria's crisp tone even in text. Your stubbornness is hurting innocent people. How long before Mr. Callahan loses his house? Before his daughter loses her future? Before this entire town pays for your pride? Isabella deleted the message without responding. She set her alarm, collapsed on the narrow bed, and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. When the alarm went off at 9:30 p.m., her body screamed in protest. Everything hurt. Her feet were swollen, her back was on fire, and her hands were raw despite the gloves. But she got up, put on Zoe's boots, and headed to the warehouse. Marcus was there again, and he wordlessly handed her a back brace. Wear this. Won't prevent all the pain, but it'll help. The night shift was harder than the first one. Her exhausted body moved slower, made more mistakes. She dropped a box marked fragile, the sound of breaking glass making her want to cry. Tommy docked her pay for it, company policy, but Marcus quietly helped her clean it up without making her feel worse. We've all been there, he said. First week's always hell. By the time the shift ended, Isabella could barely walk. She had to sit on the curb outside for 10 minutes before she could manage the walk back. The sun was rising again, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed to mock her exhaustion. Day 3. 4 more to go. She made it through breakfast prep with Mrs. Patterson, though the older woman kept shooting her worried looks. Made it to Sal's, where Dottie quietly adjusted her section to give her the easier tables. Made it through the lunch rush without dropping anything else. But when she saw Luke's truck pull up outside, saw him heading in with a determined look on his face, she knew something was wrong. He found her by the coffee station. We need to talk. I'm working. Sal gave me 2 minutes. His expression was grim. Your father's escalating. The bank called in my mortgage. I have 72 hours to pay in full, or they start foreclosure. Isabella's knees nearly buckled. Luke, I'm so sorry. Don't. This isn't your fault. But Isabella, you need to know what you're up against. He's not going to stop at me. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house license is suddenly under review. The diner's health inspection got moved up to tomorrow, and we both know they'll find violations if they want to. He's systematically targeting everyone who's helping you. Then I should leave, disappear completely. Where would you go? With what money, and you think he won't find you? Luke shook his head. Running isn't the answer. Then what is? Fight back, but smart. You've got something he needs. You're the key to this merger. Use that leverage. I already am. The week was his idea, his terms. Time to change the game. Before Isabella could ask what he meant, Dottie called out that her break was over. Luke squeezed her shoulder and left, but his words echoed in her mind. Change the game. That night at the warehouse, she could barely lift the boxes. Marcus and 2 other workers quietly picked up her slack, forming an unspoken alliance to help her through. Tommy had to notice, but he said nothing, just marked her time card at the end of the shift. Day 4 dawned gray and drizzling. Isabella's body had moved past pain into a kind of numbness. She moved like a robot through her routines, breakfast prep, diner shift, warehouse shift. But her mind was working, thinking about Luke's words. Change the game. On day 5, she could barely get out of bed. Mrs. Patterson brought her coffee and toast, tisking over her condition. You're killing yourself, girl. 2 more days. You won't make 2 more days. Your body's shutting down. She was right. Isabella's hands shook constantly now. She dozed off standing up during her diner shift, jerking awake when she nearly dropped a coffee pot. Even the customers were noticing, speaking to her gently, tipping extra as if that could somehow help. That night, she collapsed at the warehouse. One moment she was lifting a box, the next she was on the concrete floor, with Marcus's concerned face hovering over her. That's it, Tommy said. You're done. Can't have you dying on my shift. No, please. Go home, Isabella. You proved whatever you were trying to prove. Marcus helped her to her feet, practically carrying her outside. He's right. You've done enough. It's not enough until the week is over. The week's going to be over with you in the hospital if you keep this up. Zoe was waiting outside, having apparently been called. She drove Isabella back to Mrs. Patterson's, practically carrying her up the stairs. "You're an idiot," Zoe said, but her tone was affectionate. A brave idiot, but still an idiot. Isabella lay in bed, staring at the ceiling through tears of exhaustion and defeat. 2 days left, and her body had betrayed her. She'd failed. Tomorrow, Pike would arrive with his smug smile and his legal documents, and she'd have to go back to her cage. Her phone buzzed. "Luke. Saw the news about the warehouse. You okay?" "Failed," she typed back, fingers clumsy with exhaustion. "Not failed. Regrouping. Meet me tomorrow, noon, the park. Bring whatever strength you have left." She wanted to ask what he was planning, but sleep pulled her under before she could type the question. Day 6 arrived with a knock at her door. Not her alarm, she'd slept through that. Mrs. Patterson stood there with a breakfast tray and a stern expression. "Eat, shower, get dressed in something that isn't work clothes. I have to get to the diner seat. Sal knows you're not coming. Neither is half the town, apparently." "What?" "Just get ready. You'll see." Isabella managed to eat, shower, and put on the one decent outfit she had. A simple sundress of Karen's that actually fit reasonably well. She walked to the park, each step still painful but manageable after actual sleep. The park was full of people. Workers from the plant, customers from the diner, people she'd seen around town. And at the center, Luke stood with a woman Isabella didn't recognize. Sharp-faced, professionally dressed, with the bearing of someone used to fighting battles. "Isabella, this is Janet Morgan," Luke said. "She's a labor attorney from Pittsburgh, and she has some interesting thoughts about your situation." Janet stepped forward, offering her hand. "Miss Carter, I've been following your story. I think you're approaching this wrong. I'm just trying to survive the week." "Exactly. You're playing defense. Time to go on offense." Janet pulled out a tablet. "Your father's actions over the past week constitute harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and arguably extortion. He's used his financial power to threaten and harm innocent bystanders to coerce you into compliance. He has better lawyers. He has corporate lawyers. I have something better, public opinion, and a sympathetic plaintiff." Janet smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. "But more importantly, I have this." She showed Isabella the tablet screen. It was a financial disclosure document from Carter Tech's SEC filings. Page 247, subsection 3. The merger agreement with Ashford Industries. It specifically names you as a material participant. Without your cooperation, the merger faces regulatory challenges that could delay or prevent approval. Isabella read the dense legal text, understanding dawning. He needs me. He needs you cooperative and compliant. What he has now is a public relations nightmare and a daughter whose rebellion is trending on social media. Janet pulled up another screen, Twitter, with #TeamIsabella trending. Every day you stand up to him, his stock price drops. Investors get nervous. The board gets restless. "But I can't keep working like this." "You don't have to," Luke interrupted. "That's what Janet's explaining. You've already won." "I haven't made it the week." "The week was his construct," Janet said. "A test designed for you to fail. But you've already succeeded in what matters. You've shown the world that Richard Carter will destroy anyone who defies him. You've exposed his true nature, and that gives you power." Isabella looked around the park at all the faces watching her. "What are you suggesting?" "We hold a press conference," Janet said. "Right here, right now. You announce that you're filing charges against your father for harassment and extortion. You document every threat, every action taken against the people who helped you. You make it clear that you're not backing down." "He'll bury me in legal fees. Pro bono," Janet said. "I'm taking this case for free. Win or lose, it's the kind of publicity money can't buy." Isabella felt something shift in her chest, a weight lifting or maybe just repositioning. "And then what?" "Then we negotiate," Luke said, "but from a position of strength, not desperation." Isabella looked at the crowd gathered around her. Mrs. Patterson was there, and Sal and Dottie. Marcus from the warehouse, Zoe with her purple hair bright in the morning sun. Even some of the customers from the diner, the ones who'd tipped extra and spoken kindly when she was dead on her feet. Why? She asked them. Why do you all care? It was Mr. Henderson who answered, the old man stepping forward with his coffee-stained veteran's cap. Because we've all been pushed around by rich folks who think money makes them right. Watching you stand up to your father, work yourself half to death rather than give in, it reminds us that money isn't everything, that regular people matter too. You're not regular people, Isabella said, her voice catching. You're extraordinary, all of you. She turned to Janet. What do I need to do? Janet smiled. Just tell the truth. 20 minutes later, Isabella stood before a cluster of news cameras that had been hastily assembled. The national media had been following the story, and they'd descended on the park like hungry wolves sensing fresh meat. Isabella had no prepared statement, no carefully crafted words. She just spoke from her heart. My name is Isabella Carter. 6 days ago, I ran away from home because my father was trying to force me into an arranged marriage for business purposes. When I refused to return, he sent men to physically drag me back. Luke Callahan saved me that night, a complete stranger who risked everything to help someone in need. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. Since then, my father has systematically attacked everyone who's shown me kindness. He's closed a factory early, putting hundreds out of work. He's threatened foreclosure on Luke's home. He's targeted a diner, a boarding house, even a school, all to punish me for claiming my right to make my own choices. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I've spent the last 5 days working minimum wage jobs, trying to prove I could survive without the Carter fortune. And you know what? I nearly killed myself trying. Not because the work is beneath me, but because the work is hard. Harder than anything I've ever done. The people who do these jobs every day, who support their families on these wages, who maintain their dignity despite being looked down on by people like my father, they're heroes. She spotted Pike at the edge of the crowd, his phone pressed to his ear, no doubt reporting to Richard. My father gave me a week to prove I could make it on my own. I failed that test by his standards. I collapsed at work, I couldn't maintain the pace, but I've succeeded in ways he never expected. I've discovered that wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the willingness of strangers to help someone in need. It's measured in solidarity, in kindness, in the courage to stand up to bullies no matter how powerful they are. Isabella took a deep breath. So here's my message to my father. I'm not coming back. Not to your world of arranged marriages and corporate mergers and treating people like chess pieces. I'm staying here, with people who value character over cash. And if you continue to harass and threaten this community, we will fight back. Not with money or influence, but with truth and determination and the knowledge that some things can't be bought. She stepped back from the microphones. The reporters erupted with questions, but Janet stepped forward to field them. Luke appeared at Isabella's side, guiding her away from the chaos. That was perfect, he said quietly. Was it? I just declared war on one of the most powerful men in America. No, you declared independence. There's a difference. They walked to a quiet corner of the park where Maddie was waiting, having skipped school with Luke's permission to witness this moment. That was amazing, Maddie said, hugging Isabella. You're like a real-life hero. I'm really not. You are to me, Maddie interrupted. You showed that standing up for yourself matters, even when it costs everything. Isabella's phone rang. Unknown number, but she knew who it would be. Hello, Father. You've lost your mind. Richard's voice was ice cold. Do you have any idea what you've just done to our stock price? Made it accurately reflect the company's values? This ends now, Isabella. You will publicly retract your statement, apologize for your behavior, and return home immediately. No. No? No, I'm done being your pawn. If you want to salvage this situation, you'll come here and negotiate like a civilized human being. I don't negotiate with your daughter? That's the problem, isn't it? You've never seen me as a person, just an asset. Well, this asset has depreciated in value, at least by your standards. Question is, what are you going to do about it? There was a long silence. Then, I'll be there in 3 hours. The line went dead. Isabella looked at Luke and Maddie, her chosen family of the moment. He's coming. Good, Luke said. Let him come. This is our turf now. The 3 hours passed like minutes and years simultaneously. Isabella sat in Luke's kitchen, the same table where she'd first tasted safety just 6 days ago, surrounded by an unlikely war council. Janet Morgan had commandeered the living room as a makeshift office, her laptop and legal papers spread across every surface. Mrs. Patterson had arrived with a casserole and the fierce determination of a woman who'd seen too much injustice to tolerate more. Sal had closed the diner early, declaring that some things were more important than the lunch rush, and now stood by the window like a sentry, watching for the inevitable motorcade. "He'll try to intimidate you," Janet said, not looking up from her papers. "It's his primary negotiation tactic. Make you feel small, insignificant, dependent." "I know," Isabella replied, though her hands trembled slightly around her coffee mug, the same chipped one from that first night. "The key is to remember what you've built here," Luke added. "He can't take that away, no matter what he threatens." Maddie, who should have been in school but had refused to miss this showdown, sat beside Isabella, her young face serious. "Mom always said bullies only have the power you give them." "Your mom sounds like she was wise," Isabella said. "She was," Maddie replied simply, and the quiet grief in those two words said everything about loss and survival and continuing on despite the emptiness. The sound of vehicles approaching made them all tense. Not just the expensive purr of luxury cars, but something more, the rumble of trucks, the distinctive rattle of older vehicles. Isabella moved to the window and gasped. The street was filling with people. Workers from the plant, customers from the diner, neighbors Isabella had never even met. They stood on lawns and sidewalks, creating a human corridor through which Richard Carter would have to pass. They weren't protesting, weren't shouting. They were just there, bearing witness. "Word got out," Sal said with satisfaction. "Folks wanted to see this for themselves." The motorcade arrived like an invasion, 6 black SUVs forming a defensive perimeter around a Bentley that gleamed like dark water. Richard Carter emerged, and Isabella saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in her life. Not the titan of industry, not the force of nature she'd grown up fearing, but a man in his 60s who'd mistaken wealth for worth and control for love. He walked through the gathering crowd without acknowledging their existence, his face a mask of cold fury. Pike flanked him on one side, Victoria Ashford on the other, a trinity of power dressed in designer armor against the simple dignity of working people. Luke opened the door before they could knock, a gesture that said this was his territory, his terms. "Mr. Carter," he said evenly. "Mrs. Ashford, Pike." Richard's eyes swept the modest interior with barely concealed disdain before landing on Isabella. "Get your things. We're leaving." "No," Isabella said quietly. "We're talking. Here, now." "I don't negotiate in hovels." "Then leave," Luke said flatly. "Door's right behind you." Victoria made a sound of outrage. "How dare you?" "Ma'am," Luke interrupted, his military bearing suddenly evident. "You're in my home. You'll speak respectfully or not at all." Richard studied Luke with the calculating gaze of a man reassessing an opponent. "You have no idea what you've involved yourself in, Mr. Callahan." "I involved myself in helping a woman being assaulted. Everything else is just consequences." "Consequences that will destroy you." "Maybe. But I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror." Janet stepped forward, legal pad in hand. "Gentlemen, perhaps we could focus on the matter at hand. Mr. Carter, you're here to discuss terms with your daughter. Shall we begin?" "There are no terms," Richard said. "Isabella returns home, honors her obligations, and this nonsense ends." "Those aren't terms, they're demands," Janet replied. "And given the legal situation, you're hardly in a position to make demands." "Legal situation?" Pike scoffed. "You think your strip mall law degree intimidates us?" "No, but the documentation of systematic harassment might interest the SEC," Janet said calmly. "Using corporate resources to pursue a personal vendetta, targeting businesses for helping your daughter, manipulating bank loans to threaten foreclosure. These aren't just civil matters, Mr. Pike. They're potential criminal violations." "You can't prove. Actually, I can." Janet pulled out her phone, swiped to a recording app. "Amazing how many security cameras catch audio these days. Your conversation with Mr. Callahan about the mortgage, Mrs. Ashford's threats at the diner, the sudden health inspection, the plant closure acceleration. All documented, all traceable to Carter Tech's influence." Though Isabella watched her father's face change, the cold fury giving way to something more calculating. What do you want? He asked finally. Freedom, Isabella said. Complete, unconditional freedom to live my own life. In exchange for? I won't pursue legal action. I won't go public with the harassment campaign. I'll sign whatever documents you need for the merger, stating that I have no interest in the family business and no claim on future profits. The merger requires your participation. No, it requires my non-interference, Janet interjected. I've reviewed the contracts. Miss Carter's signature on a non-contestation agreement would suffice. Victoria's perfectly composed face cracked slightly. This is absurd. Isabella, you're throwing away billions. I'm throwing away chains, Isabella corrected. Golden chains, but chains nonetheless. You ungrateful little... Careful, Luke warned, and something in his tone made Victoria stop mid-sentence. Richard was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through calculations and consequences. And if I refuse? Then we go to court, Janet said, very publicly. Every major media outlet will cover it. The poor little rich girl forced into an arranged marriage, fighting back against her tyrannical father. The stock price will crater. The board will revolt. The merger will definitely fail. You'd destroy your own family's legacy? What legacy? Isabella asked. A fortune built on treating people as commodities? A name that opens doors but closes hearts? That's not a legacy, Father. It's a liability. Maddie, who'd been silent throughout, suddenly spoke up. My mom used to say that what you leave behind isn't what's written on your tombstone, but what's written in people's hearts. Richard turned his cold gaze on the teenager. And what did your mother leave behind? Medical debt that nearly bankrupted your father. The room erupted. Luke lunged forward, held back only by Isabella and Sal's combined grip. Mrs. Patterson launched into a tirade that would have made sailors blush. Even Janet lost her professional composure, her voice sharp with outrage. But it was Maddie who delivered the killing blow, her young voice cutting through the chaos with devastating clarity. My mother left love, she said simply. She left memories of bedtime stories and terrible pancakes and dancing in the kitchen. She left a father who knows how to be strong and gentle at the same time. She left a town full of people who still bring us casseroles on her birthday because they remember her kindness. What will you leave behind, Mr. Carter? A big bank account and a daughter who couldn't wait to escape? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face had gone pale, something flickering in his eyes. Perhaps the first genuine emotion Isabella had seen from him in years. You know nothing about it, he said finally, but the words lacked their usual force. I know Isabella has been happier in 6 days of poverty than in 28 years of wealth, Maddie continued. That has to mean something, even to you. Richard looked at his daughter then, really looked at her. Saw the exhaustion from physical labor, the simple clothes, the chapped hands from dish soap and warehouse work, but also saw something else. A strength that hadn't been there before. A certainty that no amount of money could buy or break. You really choose this? He asked, and for a moment he sounded almost human. This ordinary life? There's nothing ordinary about it, Isabella replied. These people work harder in a day than I ever did in a year. They love fiercely, protect completely, and stand by each other without calculating the cost-benefit ratio. So yes, I choose this. You'll regret it. When the novelty wears off, when you're 40 and still serving coffee, when you can't afford proper medical care, then I'll deal with those problems as they come, like everyone else does. Richard turned to Luke. And you? What's your angle in this? Hero complex? Some misguided attraction? I have a daughter, Luke said simply. I'm teaching her to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything. Isabella is doing that. Supporting her is the lesson I want Maddie to learn. Noble words from a man about to lose his house. Cancel the foreclosure, Isabella said suddenly. All of it. The house, the plant closure acceleration, the threats against the diner and boarding house. Reverse it all. Why would I? Because it's the right thing to do. Because these people didn't ask to be part of our family drama. Because maybe, just maybe, there's still a shred of the man Mother fell in love with buried under all that ice. The mention of Isabella's mother, dead 5 years now from a car accident that Richard had never properly grieved, made him flinch visibly. Your mother would be ashamed of what you're doing, he said quietly. No, Isabella said with certainty. She'd be proud that I finally found the courage she never did. That landed like a physical blow. Richard's composure, already cracked, shattered completely. You think she was happy? He asked, his voice raw. You think she didn't choose the life we built together? I think she made the best of the choices she was allowed, Isabella replied gently, just like I did, until I couldn't anymore. She left too, Richard said, so quietly Isabella almost missed it. Not like you, she couldn't run, but she left in every way that mattered. Charity work, travel, anything to avoid being home, to avoid me. Because you stopped seeing her, Isabella said, just like you stopped seeing me. We became acquisitions, Father. Things to be managed and displayed, not people to be loved. I did love, I do love. Then prove it, Isabella challenged. Let me go. Not as a business decision, but as a father who wants his daughter to be happy. The room held its breath. Outside, the crowd of witnesses pressed closer, sensing the pivotal moment through walls and windows. Victoria chose that moment to interject. Richard, this is ridiculous. We're not here to indulge emotional manipulation. Shut up, Victoria, Richard said tiredly, and the shock on her face would have been comical in other circumstances. He pulled out his phone, typed for several moments, then showed the screen to Pike. Done. The foreclosure is canceled. The plant will remain on its original closure timeline. All pressures on local businesses are withdrawn. Richard, Victoria protested, the merger will proceed without Isabella's involvement. He looked at his daughter. You'll sign the non-contestation agreement? Today. Then we're done. He turned to leave, then paused. Your mother would be proud. I can see that now. Daddy, Isabella said, using the childhood name she hadn't spoken in years. He stopped but didn't turn around. It doesn't have to be forever, she said softly. Maybe someday, when you remember how to see people instead of assets, we could try again. Just as father and daughter, not CEO and heir. His shoulders shifted slightly, perhaps a nod, perhaps just resignation. Then Richard Carter walked out of Luke's modest home, through the corridor of watching townspeople, and climbed into his Bentley. The motorcade pulled away, leaving only ordinary cars and extraordinary people in its wake. Isabella sank into a chair, suddenly boneless. Did that really just happen? You won, Janet said, already pulling up documents on her laptop. We need to get that agreement signed before he changes his mind, but you won. We won, Isabella corrected, looking around the room at the people who'd stood with her. The celebration that followed was subdued, but genuine. Mrs. Patterson produced cookies from somewhere. Sal opened the diner for an impromptu victory dinner, and the town gathered to mark the moment when David beat Goliath not with a stone, but with solidarity. But as evening fell and the crowds dispersed, Isabella found herself alone with Luke on his front porch, watching the sun set over Millfield. So what now? He asked. I honestly don't know, she admitted. I've been so focused on getting free, I never thought about what comes after. You could leave, go anywhere, be anyone. I could. She was quiet for a moment. But I think I'd like to stay, at least for a while. Sal says I'm getting better at the coffee pour, and Mrs. Patterson needs help with the breakfast crowd. That's not much of a life for someone who could have anything. It's everything, Isabella corrected. It's choosing my own path, earning my own way, building something real with people who see me as Isabella, not as a Carter. The work won't get easier. The pay won't get better. I know, she smiled slightly. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is the work itself, the connections, the small victories. Maybe an ordinary life is extraordinary when you choose it freely. Luke nodded, understanding in a way that only someone who'd rebuilt their life from ashes could understand. There's something else, Isabella said quietly. These past 6 days, you and Maddie, you've shown me what family really means. Not blood or obligation, but choice and care and showing up when it matters. Isabella, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I know you have your own life, your own struggles. I just wanted you to know that meeting you, even under the worst circumstances, might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Before Luke could respond, Maddie appeared in the doorway. Dad, Isabella, Mrs. Patterson's on the phone. Something about a job opportunity? Isabella took the phone, listened for a moment, then started laughing. You're serious? Yes, yes, of course. Tomorrow morning? I'll be there. She hung up and turned to Luke and Maddie with shining eyes. The community center, the one that closed when the plant downsized? Mrs. Patterson's church group just got a grant to reopen it. They need someone to run programs for displaced workers, help with job training and placement. The pay is barely above minimum wage, but it's perfect, Luke finished. It's you. Would you help? Isabella asked suddenly. Both of you? Luke, your military experience would be invaluable for leadership training. And Maddie, you could tutor kids who are struggling with school because their parents are working multiple jobs. I'd have to find a job first, Luke pointed out. Actually, Sal's voice came from behind them. When had he arrived? I've been thinking about retiring. Bad back, you know. Need someone to take over the diner. Someone who understands hard work and has proven he'll stand up for this community. Sal, I don't know anything about running a restaurant. You know people. The rest can be learned. Sal shrugged. Think about it. The place doesn't make much, but it's honest work. As Sal wandered off, Maddie looked between Luke and Isabella with a knowing smile. So we're all staying? We're all going to rebuild together? Looks like it, Luke said, ruffling his daughter's hair. Good, Maddie declared. Mom would have liked this. All of us choosing to be family. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. Good tears. Healing tears. 6 days ago, she'd run from a life that was killing her slowly. Now, she'd found a life worth living, worth fighting for, worth the calluses and exhaustion and small paychecks. Her phone buzzed with the news alert. The headline made her laugh out loud. Carter Heiress chooses love over luxury. The billionaire's daughter who said no to billions. They got it wrong, she said, showing Luke the screen. I didn't choose love over luxury. I chose freedom over fear. I chose real over rehearsed. I chose hard work over easy money. And? Luke prompted, something warm in his eyes. And maybe, Isabella said, meeting his gaze, maybe I chose the possibility of something real with people who matter over the certainty of something fake with people who don't. That's a lot of choosing, Maddie observed with 13-year-old wisdom. But good choices, I think. As night fell over Millfield, the three of them sat on the porch, not talking about the future or the past, just existing in a moment of hard-won peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The community center to organize, the diner to learn, a life to build from scratch. But tonight, Isabella Carter, though she was already thinking about legally changing her name to just Isabella, was exactly where she chose to be. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had nowhere else she'd rather be. The news vans had finally left, taking with them the story they thought they understood. But the real story was just beginning. Not the tale of a runaway heiress, but the story of a woman who ran toward something instead of away, toward community, toward purpose, toward a version of herself she was only just beginning to discover. A week ago, she'd had everything and felt nothing. Now she had almost nothing and felt everything. The trade-off, she decided, as Luke's hand found hers in the darkness and Maddie leaned against her shoulder, was more than worth it. The princess had not been rescued from her tower. She'd rescued herself, and in doing so, had discovered that the tower had been of her own making all along. Now, with calloused hands and a minimum wage job and a family of choice rather than blood, Isabella was finally, truly, completely free. The story the media would tell tomorrow would focus on the money she'd walked away from, the life of privilege she'd abandoned. But sitting on that creaking porch in a dying mill town, surrounded by people who'd fought for her simply because it was right, Isabella knew the truth. She hadn't lost billions. She'd gained everything that actually mattered. A car pulled up to the curb, and for a moment everyone tensed. But it wasn't a black SUV or a Bentley. It was an old Honda Civic with a bad muffler, and Janet Morgan climbed out with a folder of papers and a satisfied smile. The agreements, she said, climbing the porch steps, all ready for signature. Once you sign these, you're legally free of any claim to the Carter fortune, but also free of any obligation to it. Isabella took the pen without hesitation, signing her name with a flourish. There, Isabella Carter is officially nobody special. Wrong, Luke said firmly. Isabella, just Isabella, is extraordinarily special. She just doesn't need a fortune to prove it anymore. Sap, Maddie accused, but she was smiling. Janet gathered the papers, then surprised them all by sitting down on the porch steps. You know, I've been a lawyer for 15 years. Corporate battles, labor disputes, David versus Goliath cases that usually end with David getting squashed. This is the first time I've seen David win so completely. We had help, Isabella said, gesturing toward the town around them. No, you had community. There's a difference. Janet stood to leave, then paused. The offer stands, by the way. If your father reneges on any of this, if he comes after you or anyone here again, I'll represent you pro bono. Why? Isabella asked. Because what happened here matters. It shows that money isn't the only power in the world. Sometimes courage and community are stronger. She smiled. Plus, it's going to make one hell of a book someday. After Janet left, the three of them remained on the porch. The night was cooling, autumn asserting itself, and Isabella shivered slightly. Luke disappeared inside and returned with a blanket. Not an expensive throw, just a well-worn quilt that smelled of home. Thank you, she said, meaning so much more than just the blanket. So tomorrow you start at the community center? Maddie asked. Tomorrow I start the rest of my life, Isabella corrected. The center is just the beginning. Big words for someone who nearly collapsed in a warehouse 3 days ago, Luke teased gently. That was the old Isabella, the one who thought she had to prove something by suffering. The new Isabella knows that strength isn't about how much you can endure alone. It's about knowing when to let others help carry the load. Philosophy from the former heiress, Maddie said with mock seriousness. I should write this down for my English essay. They laughed, and the sound carried across the quiet street. Somewhere, Richard Carter was probably in his penthouse office, surrounded by luxury and emptiness. Victoria Ashford was likely raging about the failed merger, calculating her losses. Pike was drafting press releases to minimize the damage to Carter Tech's stock price. But here in Millfield, on a porch that needed painting, three people who'd found each other through chaos were writing a different kind of story. Not a fairy tale. Those always ended with the princess in a castle. This was better. This was real. I should go, Isabella said eventually. Mrs. Patterson has rules about curfew, and I need to be up early for the breakfast shift before the center. You're still working at the boarding house? Luke asked, surprised. Of course, the center job won't pay all my bills. Besides, I like the breakfast crowd now. Mr. Henderson always tells me stories about his service. Mrs. Kowalski brings me cookies. She smiled. I'm building a life, one small piece at a time. As she stood to leave, Maddie hugged her tightly. You're going to do amazing things at the center. We're going to do amazing things, Isabella corrected. All of us, together. She walked down the steps, then turned back. Luke, thank you. For that first night. For standing up to those men when you didn't have to. For everything since. You saved my life in more ways than one. You saved yourself, Luke replied. I just held the door open. Sometimes that's everything, Isabella said softly, then walked into the night toward her small room and her small life that felt bigger than any mansion ever had. Luke and Maddie watched her go, then sat quietly for a moment. Dad? Maddie said finally. Yeah, sweetheart? I think Mom would have really liked her. Yeah, Luke agreed, thinking of Karen's fierce spirit, her compassion, her belief that people were more than their circumstances. I think she would have. Are you going to ask her out? Maddie! What? It's obvious you like each other, and she's staying in town, and you're both single, and she just gained her freedom. The last thing she needs is to jump into something else. But maybe eventually? Luke thought about Isabella's smile, her determination, the way she'd stood up to her father, the way she'd fit into their small family like she'd always belonged there. Maybe eventually, he agreed. They went inside, leaving the porch light on, a small beacon in the darkness, welcoming whoever might need to find their way home. 3 months had passed since that night on the porch, and winter had settled over Millfield like a gray blanket. Isabella stood in the community center's main hall, watching as 43 displaced workers practiced interview techniques in small groups. The space that had been empty and echoing in October now hummed with purpose. Computers lined one wall for resume writing. A corner had been converted into a children's area where parents could leave their kids during training sessions, and the smell of coffee perpetually wafted from the small kitchen where volunteers kept the pot always full. "Isabella, we have a problem," Marcus said, approaching with a worried expression. He'd become her unofficial deputy at the center, his natural leadership and connection to the plant workers invaluable. "The heating bill just came in. We can't cover it and still run the programs." Isabella looked at the bill and winced. Their grant barely covered basic operations, and winter in Pennsylvania was brutal. "How short are we?" $800 this month, and it's only going to get worse as it gets colder." She rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar tension headache that came from juggling impossible numbers. "We'll figure it out. We always do." "Isabella, you can't keep covering shortfalls out of your diner tips." "Watch me," she said with more confidence than she felt. Between her morning shifts at Mrs. Patterson's, lunch rushes at the diner, Sal had officially hired her full-time when she wasn't at the center, and evening programs here, she was barely sleeping. But the work mattered. These people mattered. The door burst open, letting in a swirl of snow and Maddie Callahan, her cheeks red from the cold. "Isabella, Dad sent me to get you. There's someone at the diner you need to see." "I can't leave now. We have the resume workshop." "Marcus can handle it," Maddie insisted. "This is important." Isabella grabbed her coat, a second-hand find from the church thrift shop that had become her favorite possession, and followed Maddie through the snowy streets. The diner was packed for lunch, steam fogging the windows, but all conversation stopped when she entered. There, sitting in the corner booth like he'd been carved from ice, was Richard Carter. Isabella froze. She hadn't seen or spoken to her father since that day in Luke's living room. He looked older, she thought, grayer. The armor of his expensive suit couldn't hide the weariness in his shoulders. Luke stood behind the counter, coffee pot in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "He's been here an hour," he said quietly. Said he'd wait as long as it took. Isabella approached the booth slowly, aware of every eye in the diner following her movement. She slid in across from her father, noting the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. "Hello, Father." "Isabella." He studied her appearance, the serviceable clothes, the calloused hands, the fatigue she couldn't quite hide. "You look tired." "I work for a living now. It's tiring." "So I gather." He pulled out a tablet, swiped to a news article. "The Millfield Miracle. How one woman is rebuilding a dying town." Quite a headline. "I didn't ask for the article." "No, but you're living it. 12-hour days, multiple jobs, running programs on a shoestring budget." He set the tablet down. "I've been receiving reports." "From Pike?" "I've seen him lurking around." "Not Pike. I fired Pike 2 months ago." Isabella blinked in surprise. "Why?" "He reminded me too much of myself." Richard's smile was rueful. "Turns out that's not a recommendation." They sat in silence for a moment, the diner's normal chaos muted around them. "Why are you here?" Isabella asked finally. "The community center needs funding." "We're managing." "No, you're drowning. 800 short on heating this month, 1,200 short on the mortgage payment, and that's before the insurance increase hits in January." At her shocked expression, he added, "I told you, I've been receiving reports. Your landlady, Mrs. Patterson, is quite forthcoming when properly approached." "You've been talking to Mrs. Patterson?" "She wrote to me, actually. A handwritten letter, if you can believe it. Called me various unflattering names, then suggested I might want to know what my daughter was accomplishing." Isabella glanced toward the kitchen where Mrs. Patterson was probably lurking, eavesdropping. "I don't want your money. I'm not offering it. I'm offering an investment. Carter Tech needs a community relations initiative, something to improve our image after the recent—" He paused, searching for words. "Unpleasantness. The community center could be our pilot program." "Absolutely not. These people aren't PR props for you to—" "500,000 a year," Richard interrupted. "No strings, no photo ops, no corporate branding. The money flows through a blind trust. You run the programs however you see fit." Isabella stared at him. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that you have to let me do this. You have to let me try to make something right. This isn't about making things right. This is about control. It's always about control with you. No, Richard said quietly. This is about a father who's lost everything that matters, trying to find a way back to the one thing that does. The vulnerability in his voice was so unexpected that Isabella couldn't immediately respond. Luke appeared with a fresh pot of coffee, giving her a moment to collect herself. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his protective tone clear. "We're fine," Isabella said, not taking her eyes off her father. "Aren't we?" Richard nodded slowly. "Mr. Callahan, I owe you an apology. My behavior 3 months ago was inexcusable." Luke's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "I've had time to reflect. Being humbled publicly has that effect." Richard's smile was self-deprecating. "My stock price has recovered, by the way. Turns out investors appreciate a CEO who can admit mistakes." "Who knew?" 500,000, Isabella repeated. "No strings." "One string," Richard admitted. "You have dinner with me once a month. Just dinner, just talking. No business, no pressure. Just a father and daughter trying to remember how to be family." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know if I can trust you." "I know, I haven't earned it, but I'd like to try." She looked around the diner at the faces watching them. Sal trying to pretend he wasn't listening. Dottie openly staring, regular customers who'd become friends over 3 months of shared coffee and conversation. These people had taught her about real community, real support. Maybe they could teach her about forgiveness too. "One dinner," she said finally. "We'll start there." Relief flickered across Richard's features. "Tonight? I have programs until 8. 8:30 then. Here?" He gestured around the diner. "You want to have dinner at Sal's?" "It seems appropriate. This is your world now." After he left, promising to return that evening, the diner exploded in conversation. Everyone had opinions, advice, warnings, but it was Sal who summed it up best. "Family's complicated, but sometimes complicated is worth it." Isabella returned to the community center to find Marcus had indeed handled the resume workshop beautifully. The afternoon flew by in a blur of job placement calls, skills assessments, and planning sessions for the spring training program. At 5, Luke arrived with Maddie for their volunteer shift, Luke teaching basic financial literacy while Maddie tutored in the kids' corner. "Heard about your father," Luke said during a break. "You okay?" "I don't know. 3 months ago I was sure I never wanted to see him again. Now..." She shrugged. "People change, right?" "Some people, some don't." He touched her arm gently. "Just be careful. I'm having dinner with him at Sal's. Pretty sure he can't kidnap me from there." "Want backup?" "No, but thank you." She smiled at him, feeling the familiar warmth that had been growing between them over the months. They hadn't acted on it. She needed time to be just Isabella, not someone's daughter or girlfriend, but it was there, patient and steady, like Luke himself. At 8:15, she walked through the snow back to Sal's, her second-hand boots crunching on the salt-scattered sidewalk. Richard was already there, looking hilariously out of place in his $1,000 suit among the vinyl and formica. "You came back," she said, sliding into the booth. "I said I would." Dottie appeared with menus, which seemed absurd. Isabella knew every item by heart, had served them all hundreds of times. "What can I get you folks?" "What do you recommend?" Richard asked Isabella. "The meatloaf. It's Thursday, so Sal made it fresh this morning. Best in Pennsylvania." "Then meatloaf it is." They ordered and then faced each other across the table, 3 months of silence stretching between them. "Tell me about the center," Richard said finally. So she did. She told him about Marcus and his daughter Jasmine, who'd gotten the Carter Foundation scholarship and was thriving at Penn State. About the single mothers who brought their kids to the evening programs because they couldn't afford childcare. About the veterans who came for Luke's financial literacy classes but stayed for the coffee and companionship. About small victories, jobs found, skills learned, dignity preserved despite circumstances. "You're happy," Richard observed when she paused. "Really happy." I am. It's hard. Harder than anything I've ever done, but it's real. It's mine. Your mother would be proud." Isabella's throat tightened. Don't Don't use her memory to... I'm not. I'm stating a fact. She would be proud. She always wanted... He stopped, started again. She wanted you to be your own person. I'm the one who tried to make you into something else. Their food arrived, giving them both a moment to regroup. Richard took a bite of meatloaf, his eyes widening slightly. This is actually excellent. Don't sound so surprised. Good food doesn't require white tablecloths. They ate in relative silence for a few minutes, the diner's comfortable chaos around them. Then Richard said, I've been seeing someone. Isabella nearly choked on her coffee. What? A therapist. Pike's firing wasn't the only change I made. I've been trying to understand why I became what I became. And it turns out losing your wife and pushing away your daughter leaves you with nothing but money, which is a cold comfort at 3 a.m. He set down his fork. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm just trying to be better. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. Not yet. But maybe, over time, I can earn it. Isabella studied his face, searching for the calculation that had always been there. She found uncertainty instead, and somehow that was more convincing than any smooth words could have been. The funding for the center, she said. I'll accept it, but with conditions. Name them. Complete transparency. I see all documents, all transfers. The community board has oversight, and if you ever try to use it as leverage, it stops immediately. Agreed. And the dinners, here, always here. My territory. Agreed. And you apologize to Luke, properly. And to Mrs. Patterson and Sal and everyone else you threatened. Well, Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. They finished their meal, talking carefully about safe topics, the weather, changes in Millfield, anything but the years of hurt between them. When the check came, Richard reached for it, but Isabella was faster. My treat, she said. I work here, remember? Employee discount. Isabella, I can afford... So can I. It's $12, not $12,000. She paid with the tips she'd earned that morning, noting the irony of buying her billionaire father dinner with coffee money. But Richard seemed to understand the gesture, the importance of it. As they stood to leave, he hesitated. Same time next month? Last Thursday of the month, standing date. Thank you, he said simply, and she knew he meant for more than just dinner. After he left, Isabella helped Dottie close up, wiping down tables and refilling salt shakers, the familiar routine soothing her churning emotions. That was a big step, Dottie observed. Maybe too big. Honey, there's no such thing as too big when it comes to forgiveness. Just take it one dinner at a time. Isabella walked home to Mrs. Patterson's through the falling snow, finding the older woman waiting in the kitchen with hot tea and an expectant expression. So, how did it go? You wrote to him. You interfered. I observed and acted. There's a difference. Mrs. Patterson pushed a mug toward her. That man needed to see what he was missing. You needed to decide if he was worth forgiving. Neither of you would make the first move, so I did. You had no right. I have every right. You're mine now, girl. This town claimed you, and that makes you family. And family medals. She smiled. Besides, it worked, didn't it? Isabella wanted to be angry, but found herself laughing instead. You're impossible. I'm right. There's a difference. The next morning brought chaos to the community center. The news of Carter Tech's funding had somehow leaked, Isabella suspected Mrs. Patterson, and the phone hadn't stopped ringing. Local news wanted interviews, displaced workers wanted to know if this meant more programs, and the mayor himself showed up to shake hands and claim credit he didn't deserve. I can't deal with this, Isabella told Marcus desperately. We have actual work to do. Then do it, he said simply. Let them talk. You keep working. So she did, ignoring the cameras to focus on what mattered. By noon, things had calmed enough for her to escape to her shift at the diner, where she found Luke waiting at the counter. Heard about the funding? He said. 500,000? Enough to really make a difference. Heat all winter, expand the programs, maybe even hire real staff instead of relying on volunteers. You trust him? No, but I trust the legal documents Janet's drawing up. She poured him coffee without being asked, knowing his order by heart now. How's Maddie? Excited about the expansion. She's already planning a whole tutoring program, complete with curriculum. His smile was proud. She's got her mother's organizing gene. And her father's heart. Their eyes met and held for a moment, that familiar warmth sparking between them. 3 months of careful friendship, of building something solid and real without the pressure of romance. But lately, Isabella had been thinking about what came next, about what she wanted beyond survival and work. "Luke! Isabella! Order up!" Sal's voice boomed from the kitchen, breaking the moment. The lunch rush descended, leaving no time for personal conversation. Isabella moved through the familiar dance of orders and refills, but her mind kept drifting to possibilities. She'd proven she could stand alone. Maybe it was time to consider standing with someone. That evening, she was filing paperwork at the center when Zoe burst in, purple hair now streaked with green for the holidays.
"Isabella, you'll never guess what happened. You won the lottery?" "Better. I got promoted to shift supervisor at the warehouse. 30% raise and I can recommend people for hire." She grinned. "Guess who I'm recommending?" "Zoe, I can't go back to the warehouse. The center needs—" "Not you, dummy. Some of your people from the center. Marcus already has warehouse experience and there are at least 6 others who could do the work. Real jobs, real pay, right now." Isabella hugged her friend tightly. "You're amazing." "I'm practical. The warehouse needs workers. You have trained people. Win-win." As Zoe left to spread the good news, Isabella felt a surge of hope. Things were connecting, building, growing. The community she'd found was becoming something more, a network of support that lifted everyone. Her phone rang. Janet Morgan. "Isabella, I've reviewed the funding contracts from your father. They're solid, better than solid. He's essentially giving you carte blanche with serious legal protections. Too good to be true? Maybe. Or maybe a man is trying to buy his way back to redemption. Either way, you're protected." After the call, Isabella sat in the quiet center, thinking about redemption and second chances. Through the window, she could see the snow-covered town, lights beginning to twinkle in windows as families gathered for dinner. 3 months ago, she'd been a stranger here. Now she was part of the fabric of this place, woven into its struggles and hopes. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Luke stood there with 2 cups of hot chocolate from the cafe down the street. "Thought you could use this," he said, offering her a cup. "You thought right." She took a sip, savoring the warmth. "Want to sit?" They settled on the worn couch in the reception area, the one donated by the Methodist Church that had seen better decades but was perfectly comfortable. "I've been thinking," Luke started, then stopped. "This is harder than diffusing IEDs." "What is?" "Asking you to dinner. A real dinner, not grabbing food between shifts. A date dinner." Isabella felt her heart skip. "Luke, I know you needed time, space to be yourself, find your feet. And if you still need that, I understand. But Isabella, these 3 months, watching you build this life, seeing your strength and compassion and stubbornness, which is considerable, by the way, I've fallen for you. Completely." She set down her cup, turned to face him fully. "I work 16-hour days. I smell like diner grease and industrial cleaner. I have exactly 3 outfits that aren't work clothes. I'm nobody special. Stop." His voice was firm. "You're Isabella. You stood up to a billionaire, saved a community center, and somehow made my daughter believe in hope again after her mother died. You're the most special person I know." "Maddie's okay with this?" Luke laughed. "Maddie's been trying to set us up for 2 months. She'll probably throw a party when I tell her." Isabella thought about all the reasons to say no. She was still finding herself, still building her life. Romance would complicate things. But then she looked at Luke, steady, kind Luke, who'd stood by her from the beginning, who'd risked everything for a stranger, who saw her as Isabella, just Isabella, and always had. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay. Dinner. A real dinner, but not anywhere fancy. I don't do fancy anymore." "How about my place? I'll cook. Maddie will pretend to have homework in her room but actually eavesdrop." "Sounds perfect." He kissed her then, gentle and sure, and Isabella felt something slot into place, not completing her because she was already complete, but complementing her, adding warmth to her carefully built life.
When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "We should probably tell Maddie before the whole town finds out." "Too late," Luke said, pointing to the window where Maddie stood outside, grinning and giving them a thumbs up. "I think she's been watching for a while." Maddie burst in, throwing her arms around both of them. "Finally! Do you know how frustrating it's been watching you two dance around each other?" "We weren't dancing," Isabella started. "You were totally dancing, but it's okay. You needed time. I get it." Maddie pulled back, suddenly serious. "Isabella, you know you're already family, right? This just makes it official." Isabella felt tears spring to her eyes. Family. She'd run from one that tried to own her and found one that simply loved her. "I know," she whispered. They stayed there as the snow continued to fall outside. Three people who'd found each other through chaos and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. The community center around them stood as testament to what could be accomplished when people stood together, and tomorrow it would be full again with people working toward better lives. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Thank you for tonight, for the chance. I won't waste it." She showed it to Luke, who read it thoughtfully. "People can change," he said. "Sometimes." "Sometimes is enough," Isabella replied, thinking of all the changes that had brought her here, from penthouse to boarding house, from heiress to waitress, from alone to surrounded by chosen family. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but bright. The center would grow with the new funding. Luke would take over the diner from Sal, who was ready to retire. Maddie would finish middle school and head to high school, brilliant and confident. Isabella would continue building programs, changing lives one job placement at a time. And somewhere in that future, maybe Richard Carter would become the father he should have been all along. Maybe not. But the possibility existed now where it hadn't before. "We should go," Luke said eventually. "Long day tomorrow." "Every day is a long day," Isabella replied, but she was smiling. They bundled up against the cold and stepped out into the snowy night, Maddie between them, their footprints marking a path through the white blanket covering Main Street. Behind them, the community center stood dark but ready, waiting for tomorrow's challenges and victories. As they walked, Isabella thought about the journey that had brought her here, the desperate flight from a life that wasn't hers, the gas station fight, the week that had nearly broken her, the choice to stay and build rather than run and hide. Every step had been hard, but every step had been hers. "Penny for your thoughts," Luke said, just thinking about how different everything is from 6 months ago. Better different or worse different? Isabella looked at him, at Maddie, at the town that had become home, at the life she'd built with her own hands and determination, and the help of people who owed her nothing but gave her everything. "Better," she said with absolute certainty. "Definitely better." They reached Luke's house, the porch light still on, that beacon that had welcomed her on the worst night of her life and now welcomed her home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The heating bills would still be tight, despite the funding. The displaced workers would still need jobs. The balance between forgiveness and caution with her father would be delicate. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, with people who loved her for who she was, not what she represented or what she could provide. Tonight, she was just Isabella, diner waitress, community organizer, chosen daughter, maybe girlfriend, definitely family. The girl who'd run from everything had finally found something worth running toward, and she was never letting go. Spring arrived in Millfield with a burst of energy that matched the transformation taking place throughout the town. The community center had become the heartbeat of revival, and Isabella stood in its renovated main hall, watching as the governor himself toured the facility. 6 months had passed since that snowy night when she'd accepted both her father's funding and Luke's love, and the changes were remarkable. "This is extraordinary," Governor Walsh was saying, his political smile genuine for once. 6 months ago, this town was dying. Now you have job placement rates exceeding 60%, new businesses opening, families staying instead of leaving. Isabella walked him through the programs, pride evident in every gesture. The computer lab hummed with activity as people learned coding and digital marketing. The industrial training room, built with the first installment of Carter Tech funding, prepared workers for jobs in renewable energy, the sector Isabella had identified as Pennsylvania's future. The childcare center meant parents could attend classes without worry. And this all started with one woman refusing to give up, the governor said, clearly angling for a photo opportunity. It started with a community refusing to give up, Isabella corrected. I just helped organize what was already here. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his supervisor badge from the warehouse glinting. Isabella, we have a situation. She excused herself from the governor, following Marcus to the office where Luke sat with a grim expression, papers spread before him. What's wrong? She asked. Sal's medical bills, Luke said quietly. His cancer's back and the treatment isn't covered. He's talking about selling the diner to pay for it. Isabella's heart sank. Sal had become like a grandfather to her, gruff and loving in equal measure. The diner was his life's work, and Luke had been preparing to take it over when Sal was ready to retire on his own terms, not forced out by medical bankruptcy. How much? She asked. $40,000 just to start treatment. Could be twice that before it's done. Isabella stared at the numbers, her mind racing. The center's funding was earmarked for programs legally restricted. Her personal savings, built carefully over 6 months of multiple jobs, might cover $1,000. We'll figure it out, she said with more confidence than she felt. That evening's monthly dinner with Richard took on new urgency. They sat in their usual booth at Sal's, the man himself stubbornly working the kitchen despite his diagnosis. You look troubled, Richard observed, studying his daughter over his coffee cup. Their relationship had evolved slowly over the months, each dinner building a fragile bridge over old wounds. He'd kept every promise. The funding flowed without interference. He'd apologized to those he'd wronged, and he'd never once tried to manipulate or control, but asking him for money felt like stepping backward. Sal's sick, she said finally. Cancer. He needs treatment he can't afford. Richard's expression softened. How much? I'm not asking you for money. I know, you're too proud for that. But I'm asking, how much? $40,000 minimum. Richard pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then set it down. Done. What? Medical fund established in Sal's name, anonymous donation, $50,000 to start, more if needed. Isabella stared at him. Just like that? Just like that. Richard leaned back. 6 months ago, I would have used this as leverage, made it conditional on you coming back or some other manipulation. But I've learned something watching you here. What's that? That real power isn't about control. It's about the ability to help without needing credit or compensation. He smiled slightly. Besides, this diner has become important to me too. It's where I'm learning to be a father again. Isabella felt tears threaten. Thank you. Don't. This isn't charity or guilt. This is what family does. We help each other. The word family from his mouth still felt strange but less foreign than before. Their monthly dinners had become something she actually looked forward to, watching him struggle with normalcy, sharing stories of the center, finding common ground in unexpected places. There's something else, Richard said, his tone shifting. Victoria Ashford is causing problems. Isabella tensed. She'd heard nothing from her father's former merger partner in months. What kind of problems? She's backing a candidate for mayor who's promising to clean up Millfield. Code for shutting down the community center and driving out the undesirable elements. She blames you for the merger failing. The merger failed because it was built on forcing me into marriage. Logic has never been Victoria's strong suit. Richard pulled out a folder. She's also been buying up property around town through shell companies. If her candidate wins, she'll own enough to essentially control Millfield's development. Isabella took the folder, scanning the documentation. Properties all around the community center, the diner, even Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She's trying to force us out. She's trying to hurt you by hurting what you love. Richard's expression darkened. It's what I would have done before. How do we stop her? We? We. This is my home now. These are my people. Richard smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way it hadn't in years. Then we fight smart. I've already started buying properties through my own shells, driving up prices so she can't afford to continue. But the election is the real battleground. Who's running against her candidate? No one yet. Filing deadline is Friday. Isabella stood abruptly. I need to go. Isabella, trust me, Dad. The word slipped out without thought, but she saw its impact on Richard's face,
a flash of joy quickly controlled. She squeezed his shoulder as she passed, then hurried out into the spring evening. She found Luke at the center teaching his evening financial literacy class to a group of veterans. She waited until break, then pulled him aside. "We have a problem," she said, explaining about Victoria and the election. "So we need a candidate," Luke said thoughtfully. "Someone the town trusts who understands what we're building here." They looked at each other for a long moment. "No," Luke said. "Absolutely not." "You'd be perfect. I'm not a politician. I'm barely a businessman. I'm just the man who stood up to Richard Carter when no one else would. The veteran who came home and rebuilt his life. The single father who raised an amazing daughter. The person everyone in this town respects." Isabella and Luke, if Victoria's candidate wins, everything we've built disappears. The center, the programs, the hope, all of it. Luke ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was seriously considering something he didn't want to do. "I don't know the first thing about running for office. But you know about leadership, about service, about putting community before self." She took his hands. "We'd all help. The whole town would rally behind you." "What about the diner? I'm supposed to take over for Sal." "Which you can still do. As mayor, it's not a full-time position in a town this size." Before Luke could respond, Maddie burst in, having clearly been eavesdropping. "Dad, you have to do it. Mom would totally want you to." "Maddie, no, listen. Remember what Mom said when she was sick? That the worst thing wasn't dying, it was thinking she hadn't made enough of a difference? This is your chance to make a huge difference." The room had gone quiet. The veterans and other students sensing something important was happening. Marcus stood up. "If you run, you've got my vote," he said simply, "and my whole family's." "Mine too," added Mrs. Chen, who'd lost her restaurant when the plant closed but was rebuilding with skills learned at the center. One by one, everyone in the room voiced their support. Luke looked overwhelmed, but Isabella could see the moment he decided. The same look he'd had that night at the gas station, a man who saw what needed to be done and couldn't walk away. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll run." The room erupted in cheers, and Isabella kissed him soundly, not caring who saw. This was her family, her community, and they were going to fight for it. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of paperwork, signatures, and grassroots organizing. Isabella barely slept, coordinating volunteers while maintaining her shifts at the diner and programs at the center. The filing deadline was noon on Friday, and they made it with 17 minutes to spare. Victoria's response was swift and vicious. By Saturday, attack ads were running in the local paper, painting Luke as an unstable veteran, Isabella as a spoiled rich girl playing at poverty, and the community center as a drain on resources that should go to real residents. "Real residents," Sal spat, reading the paper at the diner. "I've lived here 70 years. These people telling me what's real?" The diner had become unofficial campaign headquarters, with strategy sessions over coffee and volunteer coordination between orders. Sal, despite his illness, insisted on keeping regular hours, claiming the work kept him going. "We need to respond," Janet Morgan said, having driven up from Pittsburgh to help with the legal aspects of the campaign, but not with attacks, with truth. "The truth is that Victoria Ashford is trying to buy our town," Isabella said, "so let's show people exactly what that means." They organized a town hall for Wednesday night, packing the high school gymnasium with concerned citizens. Luke spoke from the heart about service and community, about choosing Millfield not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Isabella presented the documentation about Victoria's property purchases, showing how she intended to gentrify the town into something unrecognizable. But the moment that turned the tide came when Maddie took the microphone. "Mrs. Ashford says we're not real residents," the teenager said, her voice clear and strong. "But I was born at Millfield General. I learned to ride my bike in Riverside Park. My mom is buried in Millfield Cemetery. If that doesn't make me real, I don't know what does." She looked directly at Victoria's candidate, a slick outsider named Bradley Morrison, who'd never lived in Millfield until 6 months ago. "Mr. Morrison, can you name 3 families who've lived here more than 10 years? Can you tell us where to get the best pie, or which church has the Friday fish fry, or why the water tower has a dent on the north side?" Maddie's questions hung in the air. "My dad can." Isabella can, because they're not just in Millfield, they're part of it. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Morrison tried to respond, but his polished talking points fell flat against the authentic passion of a 13-year-old who loved her town. That night, as they cleaned up after the event, Isabella found herself alone with Luke in the empty gym. "Maddie was incredible," she said. "She gets that from Karen, the ability to cut through nonsense and speak truth. She gets it from you too, the courage to stand up when it matters." Luke pulled her close, and they stood there for a moment, two people who'd found each other through chaos and chosen to build something together. "Win or lose, I love you," he said quietly. "I love you too," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "But we're going to win." The campaign intensified over the next 2 weeks. Victoria poured money into Morrison's campaign, professional signs, radio ads, even a billboard on the highway. Luke's campaign ran on donations collected in coffee cans at the diner, hand-painted signs made by high school students, and word of mouth that spread through every church, bar, and grocery store line. Richard surprised everyone by showing up to volunteer, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that looked utterly foreign on him but somehow right. He stuffed envelopes and made phone calls alongside plant workers he'd once threatened, earning suspicious looks that gradually transformed into wary acceptance. "You know," Marcus told Isabella, watching Richard explain phone banking to a group of volunteers, "6 months ago I wanted to punch your father in the face. Now, I still kind of do, but less." "Progress," Isabella said with a smile. Election day dawned gray and drizzly, fitting for a town used to hard weather and harder times. Isabella worked the polls from open to close, driving elderly residents to vote, watching for any signs of interference. Victoria herself appeared around noon, designer suit immaculate despite the rain, surveying the scene like a general reviewing troops. "You can't win," she told Isabella when their paths crossed. "Money always wins." "We'll see," Isabella replied, thinking of the collection jars at the diner, each dollar representing someone's hope for their town's future. The results came in at the VFW hall, the old building packed with anxious supporters. The first precincts reported were the wealthy neighborhoods Morrison had targeted. He led by 200 votes. But as results trickled in from the working-class areas, the warehouse district, the neighborhoods around the closed plant, Luke's numbers climbed steadily. By 10 p.m., with 90% reporting, Luke led by 73 votes. "It's not over," Janet warned. "Provisional ballots, potential challenges. It's over," Richard said quietly from his corner where he'd been monitoring results on his laptop. "Victoria just called Morrison. She's pulling funding. Without her money for lawyers and challenges, he's done." At 10:47 p.m., Morrison conceded. The VFW hall exploded in celebration, and Isabella found herself lifted off her feet by Luke's embrace, Maddie joining them in a three-way hug that felt like coming home. "Mayor Callahan," Isabella said, grinning, "has a nice ring to it." "I prefer just Luke," he replied, but he was smiling too. The celebration lasted until dawn, the entire town seemingly packed into the hall and spilling onto the streets. Sal, despite exhaustion from treatment, poured coffee and told anyone who'd listen how he'd known Luke was special from the start. Mrs. Patterson held court in a corner, accepting congratulations as if she'd personally orchestrated the entire victory, which, knowing her, she might have. As the sun rose over Millfield, Isabella stood on the VFW hall steps, surveying the scene. 6 months ago, this had been a dying town, its people scattered and hopeless. Now it hummed with possibility. "Regrets?" Richard asked, joining her on the steps. He looked exhausted but satisfied, his expensive shoes muddy from canvassing. "About what?" "The life you could have had. Luxury, travel, never worrying about money." Isabella thought about it seriously. "That life was never mine. It was yours, on loan to me. This life," she gestured at the celebrating crowd, at Luke and Maddie dancing badly to someone's phone speaker, at the community she'd helped build. "This is mine. I earned it." "Yes," Richard said simply. "You did. What about you? Regrets?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Every day, but fewer than before. Your mother would be happy to see this,
to see you like this, strong and independent and surrounded by love. She'd be happy to see you here too, supporting without controlling. Perhaps. He checked his watch. I should go, board meeting at noon. You're leaving? But the celebration? Isn't for me. I played a small part, but this victory belongs to Millfield, to you and Luke, and everyone who believed change was possible. He surprised her by kissing her forehead gently. I'm proud of you, Isabella. Prouder than I've ever been of any merger or acquisition. As his car pulled away, Isabella realized their relationship might never be what it could have been, but it was becoming something real. Two people choosing to know each other despite the pain between them. The weeks following the election were a blur of transition and planning. Luke threw himself into learning the mayor's duties while still managing his shifts at the diner. Isabella expanded programs at the center with renewed security, no longer fearing Victoria's interference. The town began to believe in its own future again. But the biggest change came on a Thursday evening in late May. Isabella was closing the center when Luke appeared with Maddie, both looking suspiciously formal. What's going on? She asked. Family meeting, Maddie announced. Official business. They sat in the center's small conference room and Luke pulled out a small velvet box. Wait, Isabella said, heart racing. Is this? Let me talk, Luke said, voice steady despite his obvious nerves. 6 months ago, you ran into my life, literally fighting for your freedom. You've built a new life, found your strength, changed this entire town. You didn't need me or anyone else to save you. You saved yourself. Luke, but somewhere along the way we became partners. In work, in rebuilding this town, in creating something bigger than ourselves. I love you, Isabella. Not because you need me, but because you don't. Because you choose to be with me anyway. He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring with a small diamond, nothing like the massive rocks from her old life, but perfect in its simplicity. Will you marry me? Not to merge families or seal deals, but because I can't imagine facing whatever comes next without you. Isabella looked at the ring, at Luke's earnest face, at Maddie practically vibrating with excitement. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a cage of gold to a life of purpose, from isolation to community, from being owned to being loved. Yes, she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, absolutely yes. As Luke slipped the ring on her finger and Maddie whooped with joy, Isabella thought about the news stories that would follow. Billionaire Heiress marries small-town mayor. They'd probably call it a fairy tale. But fairy tales ended with princesses and castles. This was better. This was real life, messy and difficult and absolutely perfect. She was marrying Luke not because he could give her everything, but because he'd stood by her while she learned to stand alone. She was gaining a daughter who'd claimed her as family before romance ever entered the picture. She was cementing her place in a community that had embraced her not for her name or money, but for her work and heart. That night, as the news spread through Millfield at the speed of small-town gossip, the diner filled with well-wishers. Sal, looking healthier thanks to treatment, gruffly offered to cater the wedding. Mrs. Patterson immediately began planning decorations. Marcus started a pool on whether Richard would cry at the ceremony. He won't cry, Isabella said confidently. Want to bet? Marcus grinned. 20 says he tears up at least. You're on. As the celebration continued around them, Luke pulled Isabella outside for a moment of quiet. Main Street stretched before them, the community center lit up at one end, the diner glowing at the other, the town they'd helped save spreading between. No second thoughts? He asked. Never, she replied. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. 6 months ago, she'd run from everything she'd known. Now she was running toward a future she'd chosen, with people who loved her for exactly who she was. The spoiled heiress was gone, replaced by Isabella, just Isabella, who served coffee, organized job programs, and was about to become Maddie's stepmother and Luke's wife. Some would say she'd fallen from grace, traded riches for rags. But standing there on Main Street, surrounded by the life she'd built and the family she'd chosen, Isabella knew the truth. She hadn't fallen at all. She'd risen. The wedding was planned for September, a simple ceremony at the community center followed by a reception at the diner. Nothing like the society wedding her father had once envisioned, but everything Isabella had ever actually wanted. As spring turned to summer, the town threw itself into preparations with an enthusiasm that suggested this wasn't just a wedding, it was a celebration of everything they'd overcome. Richard visited more frequently now, ostensibly to help with the center's expansion, but really to be part of the planning. Watching him try to understand the concept of a potluck reception was worth every awkward family dinner they'd shared. People just bring food? Without assignments? Without coordination? It's called community, Dad, Isabella explained patiently. People contribute what they can. But what if everyone brings potato salad? Then we eat a lot of potato salad and laugh about it for years. He shook his head but smiled, and she caught him later secretly coordinating with Mrs. Patterson to ensure a proper variety of dishes. Old habits died hard, but at least he was trying. The summer passed in a blur of preparations and programs. The community center flourished with its secured funding, placing over 200 people in new jobs. Luke settled into his role as mayor with the same steady competence he brought to everything, and Maddie spent her days split between helping at the center and planning what she called the wedding of the century, which mostly meant convincing Isabella to let her DJ the reception. Then, one humid evening in July, everything nearly fell apart. Isabella was reviewing resumes at the center when the door burst open. Victoria Ashford stood there, but not the polished, controlled Victoria she knew. This woman looked desperate, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her designer dress wrinkled. "I need your help," Victoria said without preamble. Isabella set down her pen carefully. "I'm listening." "Morrison wasn't just my mayoral candidate, we were involved, personally." Victoria's voice cracked. "He's disappeared with $3 million of my money. And you're telling me this because? Because your father says you're the only one who might help me." Victoria sank into a chair, all pretense gone. "I've lost everything betting against you. The money, my reputation, my position on various boards. I came here to destroy you, and instead, you destroyed yourself," Isabella finished, but without satisfaction. She'd learned that revenge was a cold comfort compared to building something positive. "Will you help me?" Victoria asked, and the proud woman actually looked humble. Isabella thought about all the harm Victoria had tried to cause, the threats, the attempts to destroy everything she'd built. Then she thought about second chances, about her father slowly earning forgiveness, about the power of choosing grace over grievance. "I'll help you find Morrison and recover what we can," Isabella said finally. "But you work for it. 20 hours a week at the community center, helping people find jobs. You learn what real work means, what these people you called undesirable are actually like." Victoria's face cycled through outrage, disbelief, and finally resignation. "Fine." It took 3 weeks to track Morrison down. He'd fled to the Caymans, but hadn't covered his tracks well. Richard's lawyers and Janet's legal expertise recovered about half the money. But the real transformation was watching Victoria work at the center, her manicured hands eventually adapting to filing and phone calls, her attitude shifting from disdain to grudging respect to actual investment in the people she was helping. "She's not terrible," Marcus admitted one day. "Once you get past the stick-up her." "Marcus," Isabella warned, but she was smiling. By the time September arrived, Victoria was a regular volunteer, still designer-dressed, but genuinely committed to the work. She'd even started dating Tom from the hardware store, a widower who didn't care about her money, what was left of it, but liked her newfound humility. The wedding day dawned perfect, one of those September mornings where summer and fall shook hands in the sky. Isabella stood in her room at Mrs. Patterson's. She'd insisted on getting ready there where her new life had begun, wearing a simple white dress from a consignment shop that Maddie had helped her choose. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, tears in her eyes. "Like a real bride, not one of those magazine mannequins." "Thanks, I think." "You know what I mean. You look like yourself, just in white." There was a knock at the door. Richard entered, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, not because of the formal wear, but because of the emotion on his face. "You look like your mother," he said softly. "On our wedding day, before everything got complicated." "Were you happy then?" Isabella asked. "We both were. We just lost our way. Let the money and expectations drown out what mattered." He straightened his tie nervously. I know I haven't earned the right, but I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. Isabella had planned to walk alone, a statement of independence. But looking at her father, seeing the man he was trying to become, she made a different choice. I'd like that, she said. Marcus would win his bet. Richard did tear up during the ceremony, especially when Isabella included vows not just to Luke, but to Maddie, promising to love and support her not as a stepmother, but as chosen family. The entire diner, packed well beyond fire code, erupted when Luke kissed his bride, and the reception that followed was exactly the chaotic, joyful, potluck mess Isabella had wanted. As the sun set and the party continued, Isabella found herself on the same front porch where everything had started, wearing her wedding dress and Luke's suit jacket against the evening chill. "How does it feel, Mrs. Callahan?" Luke asked, joining her. "Like coming home," she replied. "Like the end of one story and the beginning of another. No regrets?" "Never." Inside, she could hear Maddie attempting to DJ, Sal arguing with Mrs. Patterson about coffee preparation, Richard actually laughing at something Marcus said. Her two worlds hadn't just collided, they'd merged into something new and beautiful and entirely hers.